I had initially intended to sneak into the cellar to steal some potatoes, but I was stunned to find silver ingots stacked as high as a mountain, amounting to at least 1 million taels of silver. My father was merely a 7th-rank military official while he was alive. How could he possibly possess such a colossal fortune? To uncover the origin of these funds, I cross-referenced the ledgers for 3 days and 3 nights, only to realize that this wealth did not belong to our family at all, but was all accumulated by my father on behalf of Prime Minister Vest, with the mastermind behind it all being the Crown Prince. I suddenly recalled the recent rumors claiming that the Crown Prince had set his sights on my fiancée. My fiancée is known as the greatest beauty in the capital, Lin Peiyao. I returned to my room to deliberate for a long time, deciding that when my father returned, I would advise him to abandon the 4th prince and side with the eldest princess, yet a funeral procession shattered my illusions completely. My father, Liangguo, was dead. He had just finished his tenure at his post abroad. On his way back to the capital to report for duty, he encountered a great demon of the Spirit Bridge realm, and in the prime of his life, he perished on the peninsula. As soon as the news reached the capital, the heavens above the Li household seemed to collapse instantly. I knelt on the prayer mat in the ancestral hall, staring fixedly at my father's spirit tablet, reviewing the entirety of our current situation from beginning to end, and the more I pondered, the heavier my heart became. My mother passed away early, and I have been sickly and frail my entire life. In this world where martial arts reign supreme, I am nothing more than a talentless wretch who cannot even reach the body-tempering realm. As for my uncles and aunts, not a single one of them is a simple person. My father has only just passed away, yet they have already arrived in the capital with their entire families, claiming with their mouths that they are here to mourn, yet everyone understands that they have come solely to seize the family inheritance. I heaved a soft sigh. The situation before me is truly grim. In the end, it all stems from my inability to cultivate. At that very moment, a ding echoed in my mind. Deposit wealth to become powerful. The system had successfully bound itself to me. At first, I was stunned, but then my expression shifted completely, because this concept was something I was all too familiar with. In my previous life, when I was a laborer slaving away for a corporation, after working day and night, this was the toy I had created, specifically designed to cater to those wealthy enough to invest their fortune. As long as one spends enough wealth, any bottleneck or hardship can be leveled without resistance. Suddenly, a translucent interface manifested, hovering directly before my eyes. Host, 18 years of age. Talent. Current technique, mountain crushing thunderhand. Martial cultivation, not yet initiated. Current recharge points, 0. 1 tael of silver can be exchanged for 1 recharge point. The mountain crushing thunderhand was a first-grade cultivation technique my father had once exchanged for using his military merits. If sold in the outside world, it would be worth at least 2,000 taels of silver. In this world, the path of martial arts consists of 9 realms: body refining, meridian opening, chi-si, spirit bridge, divine storehouse, dharma idol, heavenly mandate, void movement, and eternal conclusion. Cultivation techniques are similarly divided into 9 grades. The first grade is the lowest and the 9th is the highest. To enter the path of martial arts, one must first cross the threshold of body refining. One must temper their tendons and bones while opening their dantian, then utilize medicinal baths and essence blood to stimulate the surge of vitality. Once the breakthrough is achieved, one will possess the strength of 1,000 caddies. My current physical shell hasn't even cleared the first step, but that was a matter of the past. Now that the system has been activated, who has the leisure for bitter training? Simply recharging funds resolves everything. The cultivation realms of others are forged through grueling, painstaking effort, whereas my cultivation realm is elevated bit by the system, remaining incredibly stable. With that, I immediately told Uncle Shu to accompany me to the warehouse. Uncle Shu has served the Li family even longer than I have lived. I have always held him in high regard. Although he was uncertain of my intentions, he agreed to accompany me nonetheless. The warehouse door was secured by 2 locks. One key remained in my possession, while the other was held by Uncle Shu. As the door swung open, I saw that the room was filled to the brim with ancient artifacts. They were stacked everywhere, and in the corner of the room stood several large trunks overflowing with silver. No sooner had I laid eyes on them than the system interface appeared, prompting, "Detected 3,700 taels of silver. Would you like to initiate a recharge?" Within my mind, I uttered a single word, recharge. The system then requested the amount. I did not dare to commit everything at once. I decided to start with 1,000 taels to test the waters. I had to see if this system truly functioned within this world. As soon as the transaction was complete, the system's notification chimed once more. Your first recharge will be doubled in value, up to a maximum limit of 10,000 points. In an instant, my 1,000 points transformed into 2,000. Looking at the interface, I felt the urge to slap myself twice. Had I known there were such lucrative rewards to be gained, I should have staked everything in a single attempt. However, regret serves no purpose now. I must focus on securing the boon currently before me. At that very moment, the technique manual that had been grayed out on the interface suddenly ignited with a brilliant light. A series of instructional notifications immediately manifested before my eyes. To reach the introductory level of the mountain-pushing thunderhand requires 100 points. Reaching proficiency requires 200 points, minor success requires 400 points, major success requires 800 points, and perfection requires 600 points. Following this, the system dealt a lethal blow to my composure. Upon learning a technique for the first time, choosing to upgrade directly to perfection grants a 50% discount. Only 800 points are required. Seeing this, I could only laugh. It is truly worthy of being something I personally crafted in my previous life. It is perfectly designed with every trick imaginable to swindle one's wealth. Yet I had no mind to curse its cunning now, for the more treacherous it is, the more useful it becomes to me. I whispered inwardly, "System, upgrade the mountain-pushing Thunderhand to the level of perfection." In the very next heartbeat, 800 points were instantly deducted, followed by a deluge of memories, both foreign and familiar, that surged violently into my consciousness. From introduction to proficiency, then from minor success advancing to major success. Finally, the complete mantras of the mountain-pushing Thunderhand at the level of perfection. How each tendon and bone must exert force, how to rotate when to drop my stance, and how to withdraw. Everything was forcefully imprinted into my very being. Before I could even contemplate the implications, my body moved instinctively, legs spreading wide as I lowered my center of gravity. Right there, within the warehouse, I unleashed the full sequence of the mountain-pushing Thunderhand, executing every movement from beginning to end without missing a single strike. Every technique was filled with overwhelming rigidity and explosive power, to the point that I tore through the very air, creating shrill, piercing shrieks. A crisp, resounding crack echoed from within my body, as if some unseen shackle had been shattered into pieces. Immediately following this, every bone in my body began to reconstruct itself with manic intensity. The sound of bones splintering echoed incessantly. My sinews and muscles felt as though they were being crushed bit by bit, only to be knit back together over and over again. Such agony is fundamentally beyond what an ordinary person could endure. Cold sweat instantly poured from my forehead like a torrential rain, the color drained entirely from my lips, and my legs trembled uncontrollably, to the point where even standing firm became an immense struggle. Finally, I could no longer suppress a few muffled groans of pain. Outside the warehouse, Toothuk asked anxiously, "Young master, what is the matter? Do you require me to enter?" I gritted my teeth, bracing myself to withstand the bone-piercing torment. "There is no need, do not come inside." As the words left my lips, the final strand of sinew in my body was completely reconstructed. With a thunderous boom, I felt the blood and vital energy throughout my body explode into a frenzy, and I felt as though my very existence had ascended to the next level, entering the body-tempering realm. I had finally crossed the threshold, yet the transformation was far from over. My cultivation had just broken into the body-tempering realm, when it began to soar with madness, surging through the early stage, then the middle and late stages, and finally rushing straight toward the peak of body tempering before coming to a halt. I stood rooted to the spot, panting heavily, feeling the torrent of power surging within me. It was a strength unlike anything I had ever possessed before. My entire body burned as if set aflame. Before, I could not even touch the threshold of this realm, yet now in the blink of an eye I had reached the pinnacle of body tempering. Is this the sheer exhilaration of having infinite resources at one's disposal? But very quickly, I realized that I had reached an impasse, blocked by the barrier of the meridian opening stage. It stood like an insurmountable wall before me. No matter how hard I tried, I could not shatter it. The reason was actually quite simple. The mountain-breaking Thunderhand is merely a first-tier technique, and its inherent limit is only sufficient to bring a cultivator to the peak of the body-tempering realm. To advance any further is impossible. To break through to meridian opening, one must possess a second-tier cultivation manual. But what exactly is a second-tier technique, and where could I possibly find one? I understand this better than anyone else. Items that circulate on the open market cost at least tens of thousands of taels of silver, and furthermore most of them require long periods of accumulation to acquire. Truly formidable treasures are fundamentally unreachable for those on the outside. If they are not in the hands of the imperial court, they are held by the great sects and powerful factions. Others might find themselves at an impasse due to their cultivation techniques, but not I, for on my attribute board, a glowing plus sign remains beside the technique I have already learned. I tapped to open it and was immediately overcome with excitement. The mountain-shaking Thunderhand can be further deduced to upgrade from the first rank to the second rank, with a base cost of 20,000 recharge points. But since this is the first time I have performed such a deduction, the system offers a 50% discount, requiring only 10,000 points. I glanced at my remaining balance, only 200 points left, and checking the silver in my vault, I found only 2,700 taels remaining, which is still a far cry from the 10,000 required. Yet, as I looked around, I did not feel the slightest hint of panic. If silver is insufficient, I still have these antiques. I immediately selected 5 or 6 valuable items and handed them to Uncle Shu, instructing him to take them to the pawn shop to be sold. Uncle Shu displayed a look of deep suspicion. It was clear he did not understand why I would suddenly want to sell these old heirlooms, but he followed my instructions nonetheless. An hour later, I returned with the banknotes, totaling exactly 10,000 taels. As I received the money, I could not help but chuckle to myself. Having wealth is truly a wonderful thing. "Uncle Sue, your hard work is appreciated," I said, offering a few words of comfort, before ordering him to bring all this silver, along with the remaining 2,700 taels, into the room where I was staying. As the 3 large chests opened, the silver light within was blindingly bright. I did not even stop to catch my breath, choosing instead to recharge the entire sum into the system immediately. My attribute board flickered as the numbers jumped. My recharge points had reached 13 to 900. Immediately afterward, the system's voice echoed. First single recharge exceeding 10,000, 1,000 points refunded. With my balance now at 14,900 points, I issued the command at once. System helped me deduce the mountain-shaking thunder hand. 10,000 points vanished in the blink of an eye, and immediately, silhouettes began to manifest in my mind. All of them were myself. They began to practice the mountain-shaking thunder hand over and over again, move after move, strike after strike. The more I practiced, the clearer the concepts within my mind became. Suddenly, in a fleeting moment, a flash of insight struck me. The Thuisen Bon Lai Hand was originally only composed of 10 forms, yet I had forcefully deduced an 11th form, followed by a 12th. The 13th form, the 14th, and so on. It continued until the 18th form before finally coming to a halt. Consequently, this cultivation manual rose from the first rank to the second rank in its entirety. The most significant part was that for the 8 newly deduced forms, the system did not require me to slowly comprehend them through personal effort, but instead directly infused all the fundamental insights straight into my mind. This meant that upon starting, I had already reached the introductory level for those 8 forms. As this surge of insight stabilized, the bottleneck barrier that had been obstructing my path began to loosen. The following second, I felt the meridians in my body suddenly lighten, much like a riverbed that had been blocked for years being suddenly cleared. The energy and blood surging through my body were now more than a level stronger than they were before. I had directly achieved a breakthrough into the Tong Mai realm. This realm is vastly different from the Duan Ti realm. Duan Ti is the refinement of muscles, while Tong Mai is the opening of the meridians. For every one of the 12 primary meridians and the 8 extraordinary vessels that are opened, one's combat power increases exponentially. Once Tong Mai is successfully achieved, energy and blood can manifest as force. One can snap tendons and break stones with raw physical power far exceeding that of the Duan Ti realm. At this moment, I have only just entered the Tong Mai realm, having opened only 2 meridians and 1 vessel, which is still a long way from the perfection of this realm. Yet even so, it is more than enough to dispose of this trash before me. I had initially intended to find a quiet place to test exactly how powerful I have become. But before I could even stand up, Uncle Z arrived to report that the third uncle's family had reached our gates. I was momentarily stunned, and then a smile spread across my face. They arrived quite quickly. I began to sift through my memories regarding the third uncle's family. Back when my father was still alive, the third uncle's family would only send a congratulatory letter during festivals to show their faces before him, aiming to flaunt their presence. At the end of each letter, they would never forget to seize the opportunity to demand more benefits from my father. At any other time, I could not even catch a glimpse of their shadows. I am now 18 years old, and counting, I have only met the third uncle's family 3 times. The most recent time was 3 years ago, and that encounter was the most repulsive of all, as Li Nihep had just entered the Duan Ti realm, and their entire family had specifically, right before my father's face. On one hand, they lavished praise upon their son's exceptional talent, while on the other, they trampled upon me, claiming I was unworthy of consuming the family's wealth. Every word they spoke carried the underlying intent of pressuring my father to divert resources toward their branch of the family. In the end, my father suppressed his anger, handing over 1,000 taels just to see them gone and out of his sight. Now, even before my mourning period has concluded, they have come knocking at my door with aggressive intent. To claim they are here to pay their respects is a lie that not even a ghost would believe. I did not bother to dwell on it any further, for no matter what their true purpose may be, once they have stepped onto my territory, they will be forced to swallow their pride and leave empty-handed. Uncle Tu, lead them away first. I shall follow shortly. Uncle Tu obeyed my command and guided the family away, while I calmly adjusted my attire and proceeded toward the morning hall. Before I had even stepped inside, I overheard Uncle Tu repeating the words of my third uncle verbatim. They claimed that since my father is gone, there is no one left to discipline me, and that from now on, this house should be under his command. He even boasted that once he seizes control of the family, the first person he intends to cast out is Uncle Tu. Hearing this, I found the situation truly laughable. To put it bluntly, a man like Liangshin believes he has a firm grasp on me. His confidence stems from only 2 reasons. First, he is a body-refining martial artist, and second, his son, Li Ye, has also stepped into the body-refining realm. It is a pity they remain unaware that the useless Li Dui they despise has already ascended to the rank of a bone-tempering martial artist. I arrived outside the morning hall and stopped, listening to every arrogant word spoken within. My third uncle stood before my father's spirit tablet, spewing wild delusions, claiming that I am incapable of maintaining the family estate, and that only his branch could truly bring glory to the Li family. He even feigned benevolence, saying that after swallowing everything my father left behind, he would still deign to grant me a scrap of food to survive. I stood outside the door without uttering a single word, silently observing Uncle Tu behind me, whose face had turned pale with fury. Yet I grew increasingly calm, for I understood clearly that reasoning with such people is entirely futile. Only through the force of one's fists can matters be resolved. I stepped across the threshold. The 3 people in the memorial hall turned their gazes toward me in unison. Third Uncle Liangsen beamed with delight, grinning as if the position of clan head were already within his grasp. Li Ye stood by his side, his face full of smug satisfaction. Li Luo maintained that same cold, detached expression. acting as if no one were beneath his notice, yet the moment they saw me refuse to lower my head, their expressions shifted drastically. Li Angshan in particular, who had been grinning from ear to ear just moments ago, now saw his aged face lengthen with sullen indignation. Li Wei, what are you standing there for, dumbfounded? Do you not even know how to greet your third uncle when you see him? I looked at him and offered only a faint, hollow laugh. Was he even worthy of my greeting? That I did not lash out and strike him then, and there was already a sign of respect for this memorial hall. Li Ye immediately flew into a rage, rushing forward to point his finger directly at my face as he scolded me. How dare you show such an attitude toward my father? You are now nothing more than an orphan, a useless, talentless fool who cannot even enter the body-tempering stage. If it were not for my father and me protecting you, you would not have lasted a few days before being discarded in the wilderness, to be devoured by wild beasts. Hearing these words, I could not help but laugh. When my father was still alive, this lowly wretch would not have dared to even breathe in my presence. Now that my father has just passed, any two-bit creature dares to climb over my head and act with such insolence. If those standing here were descendants of a great imperial clan or martial artists of the Meridian opening stage stronger than I might have had to endure their arrogance. But for two people who have only just stepped into the body-tempering realm to dare brandish their fangs before me, do they truly think I am already dead and buried? The more violently Li Ye spewed his insults, the colder my gaze became. I knew full well he was deliberately provoking me, hoping to goad me into a verbal confrontation. He intended to use it as a pretext to strike, but I had no interest in wasting breath on such nonsense. When dealing with his kind, the most effective method is a single slap. In the very next second, I swung my arm wide, my fingers locked into a heavy, decisive palm strike. The speed was startling, the air was torn asunder, emitting a sharp, crisp crack. Following a resounding slap that echoed throughout the memorial hall, absolute silence fell. Li Ye was sent reeling, his mind reeling from the force of the blow. He clutched his face, which had already begun to swell, standing there dazed as if his soul had been ripped away. It took a long moment for him to finally regain his senses. Immediately following this was a frantic roar. Do you dare strike me? You actually had the audacity to strike me, yet I stood there without even batting an eye. And what if I did strike you? Did you truly think I would not dare to lay a hand on you? This slap did not just land on Li Ye's face, it struck directly at the pride of the third uncle as well. The expression on Li Angshan's face darkened, looking utterly terrifying. It was clear that he intended to lunge straight toward me. At that very moment, Uncle Su stepped forward silently, placing himself directly in front of me to stand guard. He did not utter a single word, standing there like an immovable monolith, yet the aura he radiated was not inferior in the slightest. He has followed me for over 20 long years, having braved life and death on blood-soaked battlefields. Although his foundation has been severely damaged, leaving him destined to remain at the Duan Ti realm for the rest of his life, within the confines of the Duan Ti realm, Uncle Shu is virtually peerless. Li Angshan's gaze flickered incessantly, but in the end he did not dare to act rashly. He understood all too well that if a fight were to break out, he might not necessarily emerge victorious against Uncle Shu. He did not dare to make a move. The scoundrel Li felt his face burning as if seared by fire. The fury within his heart surged straight to the crown of his head. Seeing that his father refused to step forward to seek justice for him, he decided to stand up and issue a challenge himself. He spat out that without my father's protection, I would be nothing more than a talentless piece of trash. He even loudly declared that I would soon pay a heavy price for my insolent actions just now. Having finished, he immediately assumed a combat stance. He stared at me intently, much like a mad dog, looking as if he wished to devour me alive on the spot. Uncle Shu was prepared to intervene but was desperately held back by Li Angshan. The old man spoke with false righteousness, claiming that matters between the youth should be left for them to resolve on their own. Li Angshan feigned a show of magnanimity, instructing Li Yi to show restraint with his strikes, saying he should simply avoid crippling me, yet everyone present could hear the truth. There was not a shred of goodwill contained within those words. The moment the words left his lips, Li Ye lunged aggressively toward me. He channeled the power of the mid-stage body-refining realm to its absolute limit, unleashing a strike carrying a force of at least 1,000 caddies. His fist tore through the air, hurtling directly toward my face. It was clear that he intended to cripple my cultivation base. My gaze instantly turned chillingly cold. Only a single thought remained within my mind. If you seek to cripple me, then do not blame me for returning the favor. I raised my right arm slightly. With a subtle shift of my elbow to gain momentum, I lowered my center of gravity. In that heartbeat, I unleashed a strike of immense power. It held no flowery techniques. It required no combat maneuvers. I did not even bother to activate any cultivation manual. It was nothing more than the raw, unadulterated power of the physical body. Yet, the moment this fist was thrown, the expressions of everyone present in the hall changed drastically. The air was rent asunder, producing a thunderous sonic boom. In the following instant, our fists collided directly, emitting a deafening roar that shook the very space around us. Li Ye's triumphant expression vanished, replaced instantly by absolute terror. For the moment his fist struck mine, it felt not as though he were striking a person, but rather as if he were slamming into an immovable mountain. His entire right arm began to deform starting from his fingertips. His bones shattered segment by segment, the devastation cascading upward, until the limb was twisted into a wretched, mangled mess. He let out a blood-curdling scream, the sound of his agony echoing throughout the estate. Li Yi collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain while cradling his crippled arm. Meanwhile, I calmly withdrew my fist. I looked down at him with an icy gaze, as if I were observing a dying beast. Everything had transpired so swiftly that even Shu Su was left stunned. Having campaigned across the battlefield alongside my father, he had witnessed countless grand spectacles in his time, yet he could never have imagined that I would be capable of reducing Li Ye to such a state with a single strike. By the time he regained his composure, Li Angshan had already rushed forward, cradling his good-for-nothing son in his arms. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, glaring at me with unbridled hatred as he roared, "Li Wei, how could you be so cruel as to strike your own younger brother?" I curled my lip into a cold smile and replied, "He is merely a cousin. Tell me, third uncle, do you intend to strike me as well?" My words caused the muscles in Li Angshan's face to twitch uncontrollably. Naturally, he wanted to strike, but he did not dare. Meanwhile, Leah was in so much agony he could not speak, yet he still struggled to pull back his father's hand. It was clear that he too feared that if his father truly took action, the situation would become impossible to resolve. Li Angshan could only grit his teeth and offer a threat. "I am taking Li Ye to the infirmary. Once I return, I will settle this score with you." With that, he and Li Luo helped Li Ye out of the hall. Just as they stepped across the threshold of the spirit hall, I stood behind them and calmly called out, "Third uncle, it is not yet your place to be the master of this house." At the infirmary, Li Angshan kept vigil by the bedside. His face was as dark as the depths of a storm, and he did not stop spewing insults toward me. According to him, as a cousin, I had acted with such ruthlessness against my own kin. Truly, I was a man devoid of conscience. However, right in the middle of his vitriol, Li Ye, lying on the bed, suddenly stirred. His arm had just been reattached, and his entire body was as frail as parchment. With great difficulty, he lifted his hand to grasp Li Angshan. His trembling voice caused Li Angshan to freeze, then furrow his brows in hatred as he said, "Li Wei has deceived us." Li Yi gasped for air before he could continue. "I suspect he has reached the body-refining realm." By saying this, he was clearly still trying to save some semblance of face. In truth, he understood perfectly well that I had not merely stepped into the body-refining realm. I was, in fact, significantly stronger than he was. Yet, he dared not admit it. Upon hearing the words body-refining, Li Angshan was instantly jolted into realization. Previously, he had been too preoccupied with his son's condition to think clearly. Now, reflecting on everything, the only explanation he could find was that I had been hiding my strength all along, and was never good for nothing at all. The more he thought about it, the uglier his expression became, and the deeper his hatred grew. Yet he still had no intention of stopping here. Because Li Angshan believed that even if I had stepped onto the path of martial arts, I was still nothing more than a youth who had just begun his training. And behind him, there was a promise of a far brighter future. He was still lost in his delusions, thinking that as long as he could swallow the Li family whole, he would be able to lead this branch to greatness. Finally, I had established a firm foothold in this land. After driving that entire family away, I felt a sudden sense of relief wash over me. Even the breeze blowing through the courtyard seemed to grow gentler. But as I turned around, I found Uncle Su staring intently at me. His gaze was so sharp that it sent a chill down my spine. I knew that the strength I revealed at the spirit hall could no longer be hidden. And so, I took the initiative to speak first, addressing him as Uncle Shu. I explained that I had only achieved a breakthrough to the body-tempering realm a few days ago. I had intended to share this good news with him, but the tragic news regarding my father arrived first. As for the events that followed, I was already fully aware of them. Upon hearing this, Uncle Shu merely gave a soft grunt, a faint smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. It was clear that he had believed my words, or perhaps he had chosen to trust me. However, as I walked a fair distance away, I heard him look up toward the sky, muttering under his breath, "Master, the young master has truly changed. To think he could even hide the truth from me, he has truly grown up." I did not turn back, only saying to myself in my heart, "It is not that I wish to keep things from you, but there are certain matters that cannot yet be spoken of." As night fell, I sat alone in the quiet room, taking the ledgers that Uncle Su had organized and examining them carefully from beginning to end once more. I was already generally familiar with the shops in the front. From the clothing stores to the salt shops and the smithies, there was nothing out of the ordinary. But when I turned to the final line, my finger suddenly halted at the name, Spring River Pavilion, Clouds Above. The 5 characters caused my gaze to harden instantly. The name Clouds Above was already legendary within the capital. Every night, the sounds of lute, songs, and flutes echoed from within, and the brilliant lights illuminated the entire region. High-ranking officials and wealthy merchants frequented the place, and even martial artists and cultivators were regular patrons. It is said that the daily revenue could reach tens of thousands of taels of silver, and such establishments, yet those who truly stand at the pinnacle are few and far between. Tiang Pavilion is backed by the imperial family. Fulu Building finds its support in the Shi clan. Longyu Pavilion remains even more enigmatic and unpredictable, and Tianshang Yunjian is considered their equal in influence. How could we possibly rely solely on my father, a man without rank or authority, to hold such an unshakable grip over the Namthen Kinko? To claim there is no hidden agenda behind this is something even a fool would not believe. I immediately summoned Uncle Tu, demanding to know the truth behind the affairs of Tianshang Yunjian. Seeing that I had set my sights on this matter, Uncle Tu's expression darkened and he began to unveil the entire truth. This Namthong Kinko was never truly owned by our Lee family. The true master behind it is the current Prime Minister, the very official who single-handedly elevated my father all those years ago, and who remains the Prime Minister to this day. At that time, however, he had yet to ascend to the Prime Minister's seat. Hearing this, my heart suddenly felt heavy. As I suspected, my father was not merely a man skilled in commerce, he was a pawn in the hands of the Prime Minister's estate. I did not interrupt him, choosing instead to let Uncle Tu continue his tale. Back then, the Prime Minister placed the Kanko of Tian Shangyunjian under my father's name for management. On the surface, it appeared to be a Li family enterprise, but in reality, the vast majority of the profits had to be delivered to the Prime Minister's estate on schedule. To conceal this massive fortune, my father secretly excavated a hidden chamber beneath the warehouse. Every month, when the dividends from Tian Shangyunjian arrived, they were stashed there, awaiting the Prime Minister's men to collect them. This heaven-defying secret was known to no one in the Li family save for my father, Uncle Tu, and myself, and the dividends from the previous month still remained undisturbed within that hidden chamber. Upon hearing this, my heart began to race in shock. I instructed Uncle Tu to lead the way directly to the underground warehouse. The moment I lit the torch in a flash, my eyes were nearly blinded by the glare. The underground vault was filled with massive wooden chests, and upon prying open the lids, nothing but glistening silver met my sight. They were stacked neatly, row upon row, filling the space. The sight was truly staggering, so staggering that even the system could not help but manifest. System detected that the host possesses 600,000 taels of silver. Would you like to deposit the entire sum? I nearly pressed yes out of sheer instinct, but immediately thereafter, every hair on my body stood on end. I hurriedly declined the offer. I quickly closed the interface. After all, this was not my money, but the Chancellor's. If I were to truly swallow this sum, it would not be an act of vengeance but a swift path to my own destruction. Do not be misled by my current mastery of the meridians. I am well aware of the gravity of this situation. The mountain-crushing thunderhand technique is approaching its limit. While this manual is considered formidable at the first stage, it is merely ordinary by the second stage. Even if I were to pour all 600,000 taels into it, without a new cultivation method, I would still be unable to break through to the Qixi realm. And under the command of that Chancellor, the Lingqiao realm is hardly the ultimate destination. He is certainly not lacking in experts at the Divine Treasury level. If I were to touch this money today, within a few days I would likely be finding a new place to rest, permanently. I wouldn't even need to choose my own coffin. I stood in the cellar for half an incense stick of time, my eyes burning red from staring, until I finally forced myself to retreat. That was not money, it was a blade. Whoever touches it shall perish. Returning to my room, I reopened the attribute panel. It was then that I noticed a plus sign had suddenly appeared next to the aptitude column. I was stunned for a moment, then nearly burst into laughter. I had completely forgotten about this mechanic. My colleagues in my past life, those who worked in project planning, had spent no small amount of effort designing such systems. From refusing to directly address the users as valued guests, to forcing the use of alternative titles, and requiring cumulative spending to reach a certain threshold before unlocking the next stage. Furthermore, to unlock new features, one had to expend even more points. It was a cycle of endless schemes, truly malicious to the core. Yet as dark as it was, the resulting power was undeniably immense. By simply raising my aptitude, all costs would be reduced and my attributes would increase in tandem. This was the true privilege of a benefactor. Without the slightest hesitation, I poured 2,000 points into it, upgrading my aptitude from fishwood to ordinary. My balance dropped to 2,900 points, but that was enough. I tapped the plus sign next to the second stage of the mountain-crushing thunderhand. The interface immediately displayed the costs. 200 for proficiency, 600 for minor completion, 1,400 for major completion, and 3,000 for perfection. Since I had already reached the entry level, the initial 200 points were exempted. Coupled with the discount granted after upgrading my aptitude, I could advance all the way to perfection in a single breath. It cost exactly 2,700 points. Without a moment's hesitation, I chose to maximize the upgrade. In that very instant, a vast surge of enlightenment regarding the second stage mountain-shattering thunderpalm flooded into my mind once more. This time, it was far more intense than before. Not merely the movements, but the very essence of channeling qi through the meridians and the explosive release of power. The system forcibly imprinted the method of condensing my physical body and blood essence into a single unified force directly into my being. I immediately sprang from my bed, assumed the stance, and executed the second stage mountain-shattering thunderpalm. After completing the full set of this technique, the sensation was entirely different from the previous attempt. The flow of qi within my body circulated relentlessly along my meridians. Every point it touched brought an agonizing, soul-tearing pain. Yet this time I gritted my teeth and endured it, not even a single groan escaping my lips. By the time the final move concluded, 2 more meridians had been opened within me, adding to the breakthrough from my previous training. Having successfully cleared these 2, I now possess a total of 4 cleared meridians and 2 vessels. My qi flow within these meridians has stabilized completely. However, at this very moment, I noticed the plus sign beside the mountain-shattering thunderpalm had vanished. This indicates that this technique has been cultivated to its absolute limit. While I tasted the sweetness of my first success through it, it can go no further. To progress further, I must seek out a new cultivation manual. With this thought, I did not rush to prompt the system again. Instead, I collapsed onto my bed to reflect and organize my thoughts on the people and events surrounding me. Beyond the trouble caused by my second and third uncles, I recalled another significant figure, Lin Peiyao, my fiancée in name, the foremost beauty of the capital. This engagement was arranged by my father years ago while he served at the border. Lin Yishui was his former comrade in arms, a man of upright character. His daughter had been lovely since she was a child, and so the two families pledged to unite through marriage. According to the original plan, we were to wed at the end of this year, but the death of my father forced this marriage to be postponed for a 3-year mourning period. This matter was unavoidable, yet the more I contemplate it, the more I sense that something is amiss. Previously, I had assumed my father perished on the road, likely a victim of the rampaging monsters that plague our lands. Since learning that he worked for the Prime Minister's residence, I had once suspected whether the Prime Minister had silenced him to cover his tracks. Upon deeper reflection, because my father is about to return to the capital to assume his official post, taking action at this moment carries too great a risk for too little gain. Yet when I thought of Lin Peijiao, my mind suddenly became clear. The Listen family and the Li family are indeed a match of equal status, but the problem lies in the fact that Lin Peijiao is the foremost beauty of the capital, while I, Li Wei, am seen by everyone as nothing more than a good-for-nothing incapable of martial cultivation. How could an engagement such as this not attract the envy of others? Once my father passes, this useless son of his would be no different than meat on a chopping block, ready for others to carve up. The Lin family may not necessarily wish to honor this marriage, and those who covet this engagement may seize this very opportunity to devour me. At this thought, a chill ran down my spine. Furthermore, I suddenly realized something. In the days following my father's accident, the Lin family, our future in-laws, never once came to pay their respects. This is truly suspicious. In my memory, Lin Yishui is not a man of petty greed. This future father-in-law of mine is usually quite upright, unlike those who shift their allegiance with the wind. But if he did not come, it signifies that there must be hidden circumstances involved. I must go to the Lin residence and investigate. If my father truly met his end because of this engagement, the culprits would never have left me alive after killing him. Rather than hiding in the manor and feigning death, I am better off taking the initiative to uncover the truth. Once my cultivation improves, I will know exactly whom to hold accountable. However, beyond the clues surrounding this engagement, the situation at the general's manor must also be considered. Now that my father has fallen, the 50% share of the Tianshang Yunjian should naturally fall into my hands, but would the general's manor ever allow me to hold such power? That is certainly out of the question. They have plenty of ways to bypass the law and seize that wealth for themselves. But the issue is that without a puppet to bear the legal burden, the risks inherent in such a business would be exposed. If I were to actually use these contracts to cause trouble, the Tianshang Yunjian would be forced to distribute dividends according to the ledger. Therefore, the general's manor currently faces only two paths. Either they accept me and let me continue to serve as their dog, taking over the entirety of my father's legacy, or they reclaim these contracts and find someone new to act as their frontman. Yet to those people, a person like me is nothing more than a naive and useless boy. Would I truly be able to catch the eye of the general's manor? If they truly valued me, they would have reached out to me long ago. But until now, there has been no movement whatsoever from the general's manor. Added to the latent threat posed by the crown prince, everything suddenly became clear to me. I have already been cast aside by them. If my fate was already sealed, then relatives like my second and third uncles were likely being used as nothing more than pawns. On one hand, they forced me to leave the Li family, and on the other, they made them perform their dirty work, while also being able to conveniently pin all the blame on those fools. It is truly a perfect plan that requires no effort at all. The more I thought, the clearer my mind became. The faint glimmer of hope I once held about seeking refuge in the general's manor, at this very moment vanished into thin air. I cannot entrust my life to the mercy of others, and especially not gamble it on a man like him. In his eyes, there is only profit. There will never be compassion. Thinking of this, I leapt from my bed, grabbed the key, and rushed straight toward the underground cellar. As soon as I stepped inside, the system notification appeared once again, detecting that the host currently possesses 600,000 taels of silver. Do you wish to deposit the entire amount? This time I did not hesitate any further. A soft chime sounded from the system as I confirmed the action. For the first time, depositing over 100,000 provides a cashback of 10,000 points. My account balance instantly surged to 200 points. At this moment, I finally felt a sliver of confidence returning. Afterward, I stuffed all the rare manuscripts from the cellar and that small notebook into my robes, then returned to my room. I sat by the table and began to piece together the entire situation from beginning to end once more. Now, whether it is the general's manor or those hiding in the shadows eyeing the marriage contract, they are likely all watching me intently. They are merely waiting to see me pushed into a corner by my relatives with no path of retreat. I have already seen through the true nature of the general's manor. They want me to surrender all the ill-gotten wealth that the old man left behind. And then they will completely eliminate me, the thorn in their side. Finally, they will lay all the blame at the feet of my relatives. Meanwhile, they made their escape with nonchalant ease. On the other side, they are eagerly awaiting me, the betrothed of the capital's foremost beauty. Begone and die, spare me the sight of your faces. Even if that man once schemed to orchestrate my father's demise, and perhaps even maintained some connection to the general's manor, their objectives have now converged into a singular purpose: to ensure I am erased from this world entirely. I could not help but curl my lips into a cold, mirthless smile. In his desperate thirst for power, that old man has truly left me a path paved with murderous intent, yet they remain blissfully unaware that I possess both the system and these 600,000 taels of silver. The dozen or so contracts in this small ledger are not talismans for my demise. Rather, they are the very cards I shall use to turn the tables. Thus, at the break of dawn the following day, I made my way toward the general's manor. The majestic red-lacquered gates stood before me in imposing silence. I stood before the entrance, observing it for a long while. My resolve was already forged. After the gatekeeper went inside to announce my arrival, Lin Yishui personally stepped out to lead the way. He appeared utterly exhausted, unable to conceal the dark circles beneath his eyes. The moment he opened his mouth, his words were dripping with feigned remorse. He spoke of how my father's tragedy had cut him as deeply as a blade, grieving him like the loss of an old comrade, but claimed that pressing military affairs had tethered him, preventing him from offering his condolences in time. I listened to his hollow pleasantries, playing the part on the surface, while a deep bitterness churned within me. The more courteous he acted, the more desolately grim I found the state of this world. I decided then to test him directly, intentionally addressing him as Dean before bringing up Lin Peijiao. Predictably, his complexion stiffened instantly. I seized the opportunity to press him further. I remarked that since our last meeting 8 years ago, I had not seen Sister Peijiao even once, and requested that she appear so I could gauge her current attitude. Lin Yishui's lips trembled. In the end, he was forced to concede that Peijiao was not at home, claiming she had taken a wandering martial artist as her master and had currently departed to seek enlightenment and training. Upon hearing she is the daughter of a 5th-rank official, and as an unmarried woman, yet she dared to run off with someone from the pugilistic world. If news of this were to truly spread, her reputation would vanish like smoke in the wind. It is no wonder Lin Yishui dared not visit the Li residence, but I quickly realized something was amiss. What I wanted to ask was not whether she had fled, but whether someone had been targeting her beforehand. Thus I hurriedly steered the conversation back on course. It was not that matter which I intended to inquire about. I merely wished to clarify one thing. While younger Sister Peijiao was still within the manor, were there any profligates who came to harass her? This time Lin Yushui finally understood my intent. He fell into a deep contemplation, his complexion gradually turning unsightly. He admitted that there was someone, and that person was no ordinary man. It was Crown Prince Long Ming. He said that when he first returned to the capital, a colleague held a banquet, and it turned out the person behind that gathering was the Crown Prince himself, with the intention of drawing him into his faction. Ironically, on that very day, he had brought his entire family along. And so Long Ming laid eyes upon Lin Peijiao. From that moment forth, her title as the foremost beauty of the capital began to spread far and wide. Afterward, Long Ming visited the Lin Manor many times, claiming it was merely a social courtesy, but in truth all his intentions were directed at Lin Peijiao. As for the reason Lin Peijiao followed her master, it is highly probable that she could no longer endure the Crown Prince's relentless pursuit. Hearing this, my mind felt as though it would explode. That wretched Crown Prince Long Ming is already over 30 years of age and has several children of his own. Yet he dares to set his sights on my 18-year-old fiancée. This is not merely an act of shamelessness. He clearly views me as a dead man. Suppressing my fury, I continued to ask who Peijiao's master was. Lin Yushui recalled for a moment before replying that he did not know. That person never revealed their identity, only telling us to call them Wu Ming, and they always wore an iron mask. The figure of that person was exceptionally tall and imposing. At a single glance, one could tell she was a woman. It was precisely for this reason that I could rest assured and allow her to remain by Lin Peijiao's side to provide instruction. Hearing these words, I immediately etched several key points into my mind. She is a woman, wears an iron mask, and possesses a remarkably tall stature. This person will surely be of use to me in the future. Seeing Lin Yishui succumb further to his self-reproach, I offered a few words of comfort, suggesting that this might not necessarily be a misfortune. At the very least, she has departed with a true master of the martial arts, which is far better than remaining in the capital under the gaze of the Crown Prince. Hearing my words, Lin Yishui clearly breathed a sigh of relief, his entire demeanor lightening as if a weight of 1,000 caddies had been lifted. Afterwards, he followed me to the Li estate to assist in managing my affairs. As he departed, his expression was one of profound relief, as if he had narrowly escaped a calamity. Perhaps the stone that had pressed upon his heart for so long had finally been cast aside. Yet, while he felt unburdened, I found myself unable to find any semblance of ease. The very title of the Crown Prince felt like iron nails driven deep into my mind. Previously, my suspicions were mere conjecture, but now the truth has revealed half of its face. Behind Lin Piao, those truly targeting him are no mere nobles of common stature. It is the Crown Prince himself, and for someone like me, a descendant of a deceased official with no foundation to rely upon, this is a grim reality. In the eyes of the Crown Prince, I am not even worthy of being considered an obstacle. With a mere flick of his wrist, he could crush me into dust. Therefore, I must secure a formidable backing for myself. Furthermore, that backing must provide me with enough strength to confront both the Crown Prince and the Fourth Prince. It is not as if I am without a hidden trump card in my hand at this moment. That old man dared to act as a lackey for the magistrate's office. Surely he would not have failed to leave himself a path of retreat? Not to mention how much of the Li family's vast wealth was acquired through the embezzlement of funds from Tianshang Yunjian. That ledger alone is enough to cost a man his head. Every transaction is recorded with precise dates and accurate figures. Even the physical descriptions and distinct characteristics of the recipients are meticulously documented. Coupled with the accompanying concrete evidence, and the web of complex connections within Tianshang Yunjian, my father had his secretary record everything without missing a single detail. That vital item now rests securely against my chest. With this in my possession, I no longer need to skulk in the shadows or hide in fear. I cannot possibly contend with the Crown Prince, nor can I place my faith in the Fourth Prince. Seeking refuge under the Grand Chancellor is equally impossible. Therefore, the only person I can approach at this juncture, one with the influence to stand directly against them, is the Yuzhen Princess Rong Bailing. She was born of the noble consort Wang and shares the same mother as Princess Tianyang. Because the noble consort Wang passed away prematurely, the Yuzhen princess has spent these many years essentially acting as a mother to her younger sister. It is precisely for this reason that she has continuously delayed her own marriage. Following that, she established her own private residence to focus solely on her path of cultivation, abandoning any intention of ever marrying. At this moment, I stood before the gates of Princess Nok Trin's estate. My heart could not help but flutter with apprehension, for the residence was vast beyond measure. It spanned over 600 meters from north to south and stretched over 500 meters from east to west. Among all the residences granted to royalty, this estate was peerless. One only needed to look at its layout to understand just how deeply favored she truly was. After I submitted my formal visiting card, a maidservant was sent out shortly thereafter to escort me inside. As I walked deeper into the estate, I realized that there was not a single man to be found. Everywhere I looked, there were only women. Even the entire guard detail consisted solely of female cultivators. The chaotic rumors I had heard crossed my mind for a brief moment. It was whispered throughout the capital that this princess despised men so intensely that she had rejected all marriage proposals, and the gossip had reached a fever pitch. However, I dared only let these fleeting thoughts pass through my mind for a split second. Before long, I was led to a small courtyard, where sets of tables and chairs were already prepared, along with brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones, all arranged in perfect order. Two men, possessing the refined air of scholars, one old and one young, were already seated there diligently writing away. The maidservant pointed toward an empty desk, signaling for me to begin the examination. As I sat down and lifted the prompt, I discovered it was a strategy paper regarding tax reform. For me, this task presented no difficulty whatsoever. The knowledge I had gleaned from my previous life, combined with the classic texts I had studied in this one, remained etched firmly in my mind. I picked up the brush and began to write. I did not merely copy the systems of my past life, but instead tailored my arguments to the realities of this world, writing on the circulation of currency, while also proposing the implementation of paper money and salt taxes. In less than half an hour, I had already submitted my work. Those two scholars, however, were still struggling, their brows furrowed in intense concentration. As I rose to leave, I could still hear the older and younger men nearby muttering words of mockery and derision. They claimed that a martial practitioner like me was merely here to try my luck. They whispered that Princess Nok Trin sought a brilliant strategist, not a crude martial brute such as myself. I heard every single word they uttered. Yet I did not even bother to turn my head. For the act of putting others in their place is never achieved through petty arguments, but through undeniable results. True to expectations, a short while later, the maidservant returned to invite me directly into the inner chambers. The older scholar's eyes widened, bulging in disbelief, while I walked past him, calm and composed. It was not until I stepped into Mingyu Pavilion that I truly caught sight of the strategists fostered by the princess's estate. There were both men and women present, and the atmosphere here was far more solemn than that of the outer courtyard. A moment later, a middle-aged woman adorned in dark robes emerged. She introduced herself as Lan Yu and suggested I address her as Sister Lan. I responded with due courtesy. She began by praising the strategic proposal I had submitted, before suddenly fixing her gaze upon me and letting out a soft laugh. I simply cannot fathom what a major shareholder of Tianshang Yunjian could possibly be seeking from the princess's estate. Seeing no need to feign ignorance, I offered a wry smile and replied, Sister Lan, please spare me the jest. As for the true state of the shares currently in my possession, I suspect the princess's estate is far better informed than I am. Lan Yu scanned me from head to toe, her expression becoming increasingly peculiar. She began, we did indeed investigate the Li family because of Tianshang Yunjian, but before laying eyes on this proposal of yours, I had absolutely no idea that the useless young master of the Li family, whom the entire capital speaks of, could hide such formidable capabilities. Immediately thereafter, as if struck by a sudden realization, her eyes lit up and she asked, So, you are actually a martial artist at the Meridian Opening Realm? I merely gave a slight nod in acknowledgement, choosing not to delve deeper into the subject, and instead directly expressed my desire to have an audience with Her Highness, Yu Zhen. The value of what I brought this time carried immense weight. If I could not even meet the principal herself, then parting with this item would be a grave undervaluation. Lan Yu raised a hand to intervene. Her Highness does not typically receive male guests. You may discuss your affairs with me, and I can make decisions on behalf of the princess's estate. I cast a sweeping glance at our surroundings, noting that everyone nearby had retreated to a respectful distance before I lowered my voice to speak. That will not suffice. There are certain details I wish to keep from too many ears. What I have brought this time is something that could topple the Grand Chancellor. As soon as these words escaped my lips, Lan Yu finally fell silent. After a long moment, she nodded in agreement. Very well. I shall request an audience with Her Highness on your behalf. Wait here for a while. With those words, she turned and departed, heading deep into the inner sanctum of the princess's estate. I waited within Minyu Pavilion for 2 full quarter hours, until I finally saw her return. The way she looked at me was no longer the same as it had been before. Seeing her arrive, I casually asked, "Is there anything I should be mindful of when meeting the princess?" Lan Nok answered with notable decisiveness. She simply reminded me not to stare directly at Her Highness later, because Her Highness has never been fond of such behavior. Then, she added one more sentence. "I have already presented your strategic proposal to Her Highness for her review. I must say I am quite impressed by it. I had not even managed to put in a good word for you yet, and Her Highness has already taken the initiative to grant you an audience." Hearing this, I immediately understood that this princess, at the very least, held some interest in me. I followed Lan Ngok through numerous courtyards, finally arriving before a pavilion adorned with gold. In front of the building stood a swing and a stone table, while the surrounding fences were covered in peonies, currently in full, vibrant bloom, displaying a myriad of brilliant colors. Lan Ngok stopped at the entrance and gestured for me to enter on my own. The moment I stepped into the room, the first person I beheld caused my breath to hitch for a fleeting moment. A woman veiled in blue sat with great decorum in the center. Her hair was fashioned into a noble bun, and her skin was as fair and translucent as snow. Merely the portion of her face revealed to the world was enough to leave one's heart trembling in awe. Her brows were like distant mountains, and her eyes were as serene as the waters of an autumn stream. The corners of her eyes curved slightly upward, as if she were smiling, yet she also seemed to be scrutinizing me. The elegant silk robes she wore accentuated the exquisite curves of her form. Her entire being radiated an aura of immense wealth and prestige, yet it was accompanied by the pure, authoritative fragrance of orchids. From this single glance, a thought immediately surfaced in my mind. Truly, she is a flower of immense prosperity hidden within the mortal realm. However, I still remembered Lan Nok's warning, so I dared only to glance at her once before hurriedly lowering my head to offer a formal salute. Li Wei pays his respects to Her Highness, Nok Trin. She looked at me, and her first words carried a sense of undeniable authority. This is the first time this palace has ever received a man. These words made my heart skip a beat. Regardless of whether it was true or a ruse, it was difficult not to read into them. This woman was truly like a bewitching temptress, capable of stirring a man's soul with a single sentence. But in my past life, I had read no shortage of novels. Despite the turmoil within, I had to maintain a composed expression on the outside. I could only respond by thanking Her Highness for her favor. I did not expect her next words to be even more incredulous. "This palace has previously conducted an investigation into you. Do you know why?" I replied nonchalantly. "Is it perhaps because of the heaven above the clouds?" She shook her head. "The matter concerning the heaven above the clouds is being investigated by Lan Yu's faction, but the investigation into you was conducted because you are the fiancé of the capital's foremost beauty." At that moment, only one thought remained in my mind. This princess is truly narrow-minded, though upon reflection it is only natural. Women have always been sensitive to such titles, but since she had voluntarily brought it up, I could use this opportunity to reveal my true intentions. "Your Highness, this title of fiancé to the capital's foremost beauty is truly no easy burden to bear." I recounted every speculation I held regarding this engagement, tracing the path that led to my current predicament. The Crown Prince covets Lin Peijiao, and I suspect my father's death is inextricably linked to this very matter. I proceeded to lay my current circumstances bare before her. "My decision to pledge my loyalty to Your Highness is truly because I have reached the end of my rope. The Prime Minister's residence and the fourth prince would never turn against the Crown Prince on my behalf. They are merely waiting for me to encounter a mishap so they may conveniently destroy all evidence. If it were not for the fact that I have remained hidden all this time, leading them to believe I am not worth the effort of an assassination, I would have long since been rooted out and destroyed. And today, since I have come to the princess's residence while being watched by those lurking outside, I fear they will soon lose their composure." Having said this, I withdrew a thin booklet from my robe and respectfully presented it to her. Long Biling took it and quickly flipped through a few pages. Her expression grew significantly colder. "I did not expect someone as ordinary as you to possess such a keen mind." She placed the booklet down, tapped her fingertips lightly against the table, and began to expose the grand design of this situation to me. Crown Prince Longming is largely aware that the heaven above the clouds and the Prime Minister's residence share an intimate connection. What he truly desires is not simply your fiancé. He intends to use this blade to strike down the Prime Minister, Gongsun Wen, and by doing so, conveniently sever one of the fourth Prince Longshao's arms. Therefore, according to his initial calculations, you were supposed to be forced out of the Li residence by Gongsun Wen or the subordinates under his command, and then, at the moment you were driven to desperation, you would be assassinated. And then, the Crown Prince's side would arrange for someone to wait until you have gained his complete trust. Then, under his guidance, you shall expose every depraved deed Gongsun Wen has committed for the entire world to witness. Once that occurs, the Chancellor will fall from grace, and the Chen family supporting him will be dragged down into the abyss along with him. The fourth prince, Long Shao, will naturally suffer a grievous blow to his foundation, while the crown prince, Long Ming, can seize this opportunity to solidify his position as the heir. Pausing for a moment, Long Bailing looked toward me and continued, "This princess cannot deal with the Chancellor on your behalf." Upon hearing her astute analysis, I finally began to understand. The murky waters of this imperial court were far deeper than I had ever imagined, and it was not that she was unwilling to help, but rather that the Chancellor could not be allowed to fall just yet. Once Gongsun Wen collapsed, the fourth prince would inevitably be crippled as well. And if the crown prince were to lose his greatest rival, Princess Long Bailing would have no further opportunities to maneuver. In other words, the Chancellor Gongsun Wen must absolutely not be removed from the stage. Only then can the fourth prince continue to clash with the crown prince, granting Long Bailing the window of opportunity she requires. I had assumed she would see me out of the manor, but Long Bailing studied me for a long moment, before suddenly declaring, "I still wish to protect you." Her tone was remarkably calm, yet it was clear she was not jesting. "Your talents are something I admire deeply. Gongsun Wen and the Chen family must be purged sooner or later. It is merely that the timing is not yet ripe." Finishing these words, she tilted her head slightly and called for Ying Yi. "From this day forth you shall follow young Master Li and ensure his absolute safety." In the very next instant, a dark shadow manifested directly out of the void. The woman was clad in garments of deep obsidian, her face concealed by a black veil, revealing only a pair of cold, piercing eyes. With a slender waist and long legs, her figure was, quite frankly, exceptional. My heart skipped a beat involuntarily, and I could not help but think to myself that for someone of Ying Yi's caliber, I had remained completely oblivious to her presence until just now. "As you command, Your Highness," she replied in a soft voice before turning to cast a glance at me. That gaze was entirely indifferent, yet it sent a chilling shiver down my spine. Immediately afterward, her silhouette flickered, vanishing from my sight once more. I drew a sharp breath in silence. This level of cultivation must at least have reached the divine treasury realm. Otherwise, it would be impossible to vanish and reappear with such spectral grace. I offer my sincere gratitude this time without a shred of pretense. "My deepest thanks, Your Highness." Long Bailing looked at me, the corners of her lips curling into a faint smile. This mere display of sincerity is perhaps a bit lacking. I understood her intentions the moment I heard her words. I immediately unhooked the bamboo scroll from my waist and presented it with both hands, saying respectfully, "Your Highness, I have brought along a small token of appreciation." She was clearly beginning to take an interest. There is still a surprise in store. As the bamboo scroll was unfurled, it revealed a puny painting I had rendered with my own hands. The flowers swayed in the wind with lifelike grace, radiating an aura of opulence, and in the upper left corner I had inscribed the poem, "Clouds remind me of her clothes and flowers of her face. Windswept blossoms brush the railing, heavy with dew. Unless seen at the Jade Mountain of the Immortals, one would surely meet her beneath the moon at the Jasper Terrace." This technique of painting was a habit carried over from my previous life. The layers of light, shadow, and depth had been meticulously crafted, which in this world was naturally perceived as something entirely novel. Long Bailing scanned it several times, and her eyes clearly brightened. "Did you paint this yourself?" Before I could even open my mouth, the voice of Ying Yi echoed from the void. "This style of painting is truly exquisite. I have never seen anything like it." Before she could finish, I gave a soft cough. The painting is my own work, but the poem was transcribed. It was written by a great talent named Li Bai. A strange look flashed across Ying Yi's eyes, tinged with suspicion. "Li Bai? How is it that I have never heard of this name? Where did you come across it?" I kept my expression impassive. I read it when I was young. I have long since forgotten the source. Long Bailing suddenly smiled. Young Master Li is truly both talented and humble. Once she finished speaking, Ying Yi ceased her questioning. Long Bailing lowered her head to gaze at the painting once more. She finally withdrew the painting and spoke. "I am very fond of this gift. As this is our first meeting, I shall bestow a gift upon you as well." She stood up, walked behind the screen, and retrieved a porcelain vial from a cabinet. "This is the Meridian's opening pill. It is most suitable for a martial artist at the Meridian opening realm to expand their meridians and stabilize their foundation. This vial contains 10 pills, consume one every 3 days." I gazed at the porcelain vial, my heart unable to suppress a sudden shock. This type of medicinal pill is not something one can simply acquire with money. Even the descendants of the Imperial clan are not guaranteed to be allotted such resources. This return gift is truly far too generous. Instinctively, I blurted out, "Your Highness, this is too precious. I cannot accept it." Long Bailing immediately cut me off, refusing to allow any rejection. "If I am to walk that path in the future, I will need people like you by my side. Furthermore, you must cultivate diligently, rather than ending up slaughtered at the whims of another one day." These words of hers struck directly at my core. In this treacherous world, my greatest fear is that my cultivation will not progress quickly enough, and I shall be struck dead by someone's palm. Thus I stood on ceremony no longer. I respectfully accepted the porcelain vial with both hands and said, "Many thanks, Your Highness." Long Bailing turned toward the empty air and spoke, "Ying Yi, take him to retrieve a few cultivation manuals." She paused for a moment, looked at me, and continued her instructions. "Strive to cultivate. In the future, if you find yourself lacking anything, come to me. As long as it is within my power, I shall certainly provide it for you." My mind reeled with shock. What sort of situation was this? I had barely secured a powerful patron and was already being granted maximal resources. Before I could even compose myself, Ying Yi had manifested. He cast a glance at Long Bailing, seemingly feeling a flicker of surprise himself, yet he said nothing more, silently leading me away. Throughout the journey, I could not help but ponder, is this princess, this highness, treating me with an excessive degree of kindness? Very quickly, Ying Yi led me into a secret chamber. He pushed the door open, his tone incredibly nonchalant. The cultivation manuals here. Regarding your Qi, choose a few manuals for yourself. The moment I stepped inside, I was left completely stunned. Tier 2 cultivation techniques that are nearly impossible to find in the outside world were laid out here in a collection of over 20 volumes. Even Tier 3 techniques were neatly arranged, with 5 volumes available. Before I could even collect my thoughts, the system notification immediately appeared. By leafing through the Tier 2 manuals, they can be directly collected at a cost of 2,000 points per volume. My eye twitched. This broken system demands payment for everything, but if the quality matches the price, it is well worth it. I grabbed the first volume and flipped through it at lightning speed. The system promptly provided a prompt. 5-step Plum Blossom Palm is available for collection. I silently commanded the system to collect it. Next was the second volume, Pulse Opening Technique, and the third, 6 Harmony Saber Technique. Footwork, grappling, saber arts, and sword arts, not a single style was missing. I casually picked up Shadow Image Fist as well, then advanced toward the 5 Tier 3 cultivation manuals. The system notification updated accordingly upon viewing the Tier 3 manuals, with each volume costing 4,000 points. Gritting my teeth, I continued to collect Great Divine Palm, Cloud Bed 9 Refinements, and Oblivion Hero Footwork. It was only when all 10 manuals were safely in my possession that I finally stopped. This excursion had cost me exactly 30,000 points. Due to my aptitude discount, only 24,000 points were deducted. It would be a lie to say it didn't hurt to spend that much, but the reality was that I could not afford not to collect them. This system of mine may be expensive, truly, but it can genuinely help one ascend to the heavens in a single step. If one can spend wealth to master these techniques instantly, then who would be foolish enough to endure the hardship of manual cultivation? Clutching the pile of manuals in my hands, I finally stepped back outside. Ying Yi glanced at me and offered a casual reminder. These martial arts are highly valuable, but they belong to different schools and should only be used as a transition. There is no need to exhaust all your energy mastering them. Use them first to break through to the Qi realm and solidify your true Qi attribute. Choosing the most suitable inner cultivation method afterward is the only proper path. I knew she meant well, yet my heart remained entirely unperturbed. Others fear that by biting off more than they can chew, they will fail to digest it all. I have no such fears, for with the system, any technique I practice can be mastered to its absolute limit. I am in no rush to allocate my points. I must first solidify my reputation as a peerless genius. I once feigned being a good-for-nothing, but moving forward I must embody the image of a transcendent prodigy. Only by doing so will my future surges in cultivation avoid attracting unnecessary suspicion. As I departed the princess's estate, I crossed paths with the two individuals, an elder and a youth, who had taken the assessment alongside me. The young scholar caught sight of me first, his tone dripping with jealousy. Old Ta has been inside for so long, I fear he has already become a guest of honor at the princess's estate. The old scholar's expression is hardly pleasant. Shouldn't he still be at Mingyu Pavilion by now? No sooner had he finished speaking than a maidservant from behind chased after me, calling out, "Young Master Li, this is your access token. Should you visit the princess's estate again in the future, you need only present this token to gain entry, without the need for prior reporting." She presented it with both hands. It turned out to be a tablet carved of jade. Upon seeing this, the young scholar's tone shifted dramatically. The princess's estate has guest tokens classified into gold, silver, and bronze. Is that not all? Just what level is this jade token? The old scholar's face instantly darkened. He had intended to persist with a few more biting remarks, but now he was utterly unable to find his voice. In the end, he could only flick his sleeves and turn to leave. I tucked the jade token away, not sparing a single thought for these two spiteful wretches. I left the estate directly and returned to the Li family residence. Upon arrival, I found my second uncle's family blocking the entrance, locked in a tense confrontation with Uncle Z. There were 6 of them in total. His wife, his concubine, and 2 sons were all present, along with one daughter-in-law who had tagged along. Looking at this scene, my head began to throb. These relatives are truly more troublesome than the last. The moment I appeared, my second uncle forced a smile and called out, "Xiao Wei, you have finally deigned to return. That old man insists on barring us from entering to take a look. I truly do not understand what kind of logic this is." I glanced at him coldly, not bothering to offer a reply. This second uncle of mine is quite unlike my third uncle. Where my third uncle is brazenly and openly greedy, my second uncle is the type of man whose heart is filled with nothing but devious, calculating schemes. He himself is nothing more than an ordinary man, yet his eldest son, Li Ji, has already reached the late stage of body tempering. This is precisely the foundation upon which the old man dares to show his face here to probe me. In the past, he would come here during every festival to scrounge for food and drink, always making sure to bring Li Ji along. 2 years ago, he even wanted my father to use his influence to place Li Ji directly into the frontier army as a centurion. The result was a blunt and immediate refusal from my father right on the spot. My father rose from the lowest ranks of the frontier army, fighting his way to his current position with blade and spear. What he loathes most are those who rely on connections to infiltrate the military and lord their power over others. Since then, our two families have essentially severed all ties. Now that my father has just passed, he has the audacity to show his thick-skinned face at our doorstep again. I pondered for a moment, deciding to let them enter to pay their respects to my uncle first. Just let them in. Regardless, we are still family, and the proper rituals for Lishu must be observed. This time, the second uncle's family did not act like the third uncle's side, who had been clamorous and noisy the entire way here. After they had dutifully lit the incense, the second uncle blocked my path and called out to Xiao Wei. "Ah, did you just have a conflict with your third uncle?" I remained silent, staring at him intently. He continued to prattle on incessantly. "The legacy your father left behind is inherently complex. You alone cannot possibly shoulder such a burden. With your third uncle's temperament, you will undoubtedly face more trouble in the future. How about this? Acknowledge me as your foster father, and from this day forward, we shall be one family. I will treat you as if you were my own flesh and blood. Together, we shall elevate the Li family into a prestigious and renowned clan." I could not help but laugh upon hearing this. This old man is even more delusional than the third uncle. He clearly intends to swallow the entire family estate, yet he insists on wearing a mask of nobility and virtue. I had no patience left to play word games with him. That will not be necessary. Second uncle, I am perfectly capable of carrying this family legacy on my own. With that, I reached out and pressed firmly onto Li Ji's shoulder. The second uncle's entire sense of security rests upon this son of his. Once Li Ji is suppressed, the second uncle himself is nothing more than a useless shell. At first, but as I subtly concentrated the force in my palm, a power as immense as a mountain pressed down upon his shoulders, and his complexion shifted instantly, gripped by terror. Had I not held back, unwilling to drive him to his grave, he would have been forced to his knees long ago. In that fleeting moment, the look in his eyes toward me changed completely, for he understood with absolute clarity. This was by no means a pressure that one at the body tempering stage could exert. This was the strength of the meridian opening stage. I gazed at him with an expressionless face, and he hurriedly changed his demeanor, offering a strained smile as he addressed me as his cousin. "We truly only intended to assist you, to help preserve the family legacy that uncle left behind. If you are already capable of shouldering this burden yourself, then that is naturally for the best. We shall take our leave and trouble you no further." Having spoken, he pulled my second uncle away, and they departed immediately. My second uncle and the men from the Yilian alliance clearly did not understand what had just transpired. Why had his own son suddenly become so cowardly? But it was not until they had left the Li residence and returned to their inn that Li Ji finally explained the situation clearly. That brat Li Wei had actually successfully opened his meridians. As these words left his lips, my second uncle was struck by a mixture of shock and profound anxiety. He had originally intended to step forward and play the role of the mediator, planning to deceive me into joining forces with him to oust the third uncle and his son from the game, but now it seemed there was no room left for him to act as a mediator at all, because I myself possessed the strength to turn the tides. Yet even so, he remained unwilling to concede, for the inheritance was far too vast. Furthermore, someone had previously made him a promise, stating that once the grand objective was achieved, he would be permitted to take control of the entire estate my father left behind to continue serving the Chancellor. Li Ji appeared much calmer than his father, suggesting they remain in the capital for the time being to observe how the situation unfolded. Even if Li Wei had opened his meridians, if the Chancellor decided to abandon him, he would have no way to retain such a colossal fortune. Upon hearing this, my second uncle's spirits were immediately bolstered. As expected, my son is the most intelligent. By the time I returned to the small courtyard before my room, Ying Yi had been watching the entire affair from the shadows. "Ying Yi, I apologize for the unsightly spectacle you have witnessed." I spoke softly toward the void, and an instant later, he appeared directly at my side. "What is there to laugh at regarding such trivial matters? The affairs within the prince's manor are far more chaotic than what you face here." Hearing this, I could not help but chuckle. Indeed, my uncles are nothing more than paper tigers. However, among the princes and princesses, everyone is locked in a life or death struggle for power. My father left me an inheritance of such immense scale. In the eyes of others, I am no different than a child carrying a gold ingot through a crowded market. After the recent turmoil, and with someone inciting my second uncle from the shadows, it is hardly surprising that my third uncle would also join in to carve out his share. Just as I was about to put these matters aside, Ying Yi suddenly spoke up, saying, "That's right, your cousin and your second uncle's concubine share a rather interesting relationship. I have already taken the liberty of bestowing a small gift upon them." Upon hearing this, I stood frozen in place. "What kind of gift?" He looked me straight in the eyes. With a tone of utter indifference, he replied, "It is called longing. A small trinket nurtured by the Five Immortals sect in the distant southwest. It is merely an insignificant goo worm of little value. Yet for mere half-baked martial artists such as them, it is more than enough." I listened, feeling utterly bewildered. What purpose could this thing possibly serve? Ying Yi's expression remained as calm as ever, yet the words he uttered were chilling. Once the effect takes hold, the victim, upon feeling the slightest flicker of desire, will succumb to a maddened state and throw themselves upon the object of their affection. They must entwine with one another before the affliction can be quelled. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth could not help but twitch incessantly. This world is truly filled with twisted, sinister ways. That such treacherous schemes could even be conceived is beyond belief. But then again, looking at it from another perspective, Ying Yi clearly carries the refined, aloof air of a scholar, yet his methods are more ruthless than any other. To have such a guardian at my side, however, brings me a profound sense of relief. Ever since the news of my father's death arrived, I have been living in a state of constant, unbearable tension. Only then was I finally able to ease my mind, if only for a brief moment. Yet, I understood with perfect clarity that, if I wish to live freely in this God-forsaken place, relying solely on the protection of others is far from sufficient. I must ascend to a higher standing and quickly. With that resolve, I swallowed a meridian-opening pill and summoned my status interface before me. Host Lee, 18 years of age, average aptitude. Techniques, Mountain Collapsing Fist, Thunder Hand Technique, both having reached the realm of perfection. Available to learn. 5 techniques including Plum Blossom Steps, Tai Ching Manual, and several other secret scrolls. Current Martial Cultivation, Mid-Stage Meridian Opening, with 5 200 accumulation points. I decided to test whether I could immediately comprehend the third layer. The system provided its response with characteristic finality. Current cultivation insufficient, cannot learn. I was hardly surprised. I took out 5 copies of the Plum Blossom Steps, feigning deep study in front of Ying Yi. To an observer, I appeared lost in rigorous research for half an incense stick of time, but in truth, I was merely putting on a performance. The contents of these manuals had been etched into my mind the very moment they were collected. Once enough time had passed, I turned my attention back to the system interface. Moments after I signaled to learn the introductory stage of Plum Blossom Steps, a rush of fresh memories and profound insights flooded my mind. Following the newfound instinct, I stood up and executed the footwork perfectly in the middle of the courtyard. With each completed step, 3 meridians within my body were simultaneously unblocked. The Foot Shaoyang Gallbladder Meridian, the Foot Shaoyan Kidney Meridian, and the Yang Xiao Vessel. Adding those to the 4 meridians and 2 vessels I had already opened, I had now reached the 6 meridians and 3 vessels stage. This confirmed my steady advancement into the mid-stage of the meridian opening realm. Ying Yi stood nearby, staring in complete astonishment. You grasped it just like that? He recalled how, in his own time, he had to endure half a month of grueling practice just to touch the threshold of this movement technique. Yet, here I was. After merely flipping through a book for half an incense stick of time, I had already reached the introductory stage. I offered no explanation, quietly repeating the footwork twice more. Then, right before his eyes, I upgraded the Plum Blossom Steps from the introductory level to proficiency. Instantly, my movements became significantly more fluid and graceful. My entire presence radiated a sense of refined mastery. Ying Yi gazed at me for a long time, unable to look away, until, Teacher Li Duni, tell me, how do you cultivate the body tempering stage, and how does one achieve a breakthrough in the meridians realm? With a talent such as yours, why are you still only at the middle stage of the meridians realm? Sensing his clear intent to recruit talent, I did not hold back too much, choosing instead to reveal half the truth. In the past, I only practiced the mountain-shattering Thunder Fist passed down by my father. I practiced it diligently until, before I knew it, I had broken through the meridians realm. Ong Yi found this impossible to believe. One could not possibly achieve such a feat with only the mountain-shattering Thunder Fist. It would be difficult to even reach the perfection of body tempering, let alone a breakthrough in the meridians realm. Not wanting to discuss the breakthrough further, I briefly explained my father's situation. Although my father was a Qi practitioner, he possessed many cultivation techniques for both the meridians and Qi realms. However, most of these originated from the Prime Minister's estate, and within them were hidden restrictive blood key enchantments. If one practices them, they must consume a specific medicine regularly, otherwise the best outcome is the destruction of one's meridians, and the worst is death on the spot. My father did not want me to be shackled to the Prime Minister's estate, so he only gave me 1 volume, the pure and untainted mountain-shattering Thunder Fist. Other than that, he taught me nothing else. This was the absolute truth, and Ong Yi could naturally sense the sincerity in my words. He nodded and told me to demonstrate the technique for him once more. I proceeded to perform the mountain-shattering Thunder Fist from start to finish. By the time I completed the final movement, Ong Yi's expression shifted drastically. Is this truly still the mountain-shattering Thunder Fist? I told him honestly that the original version only consisted of 10 moves. The final 8 moves were added by my own hand. It was through these very moves that I was able to break through the Meridian's realm. Having said that, I demonstrated the original 10 moves separately. Only then was he fully convinced that this was indeed the mountain-shattering Thunder Fist. He stared at me intently, his eyes now filled with boundless astonishment. To think you could cultivate a first-grade technique to such a state of perfection, and to build upon its foundation with such rigid determination, reaching the 8th breath of the 2nd stage of the mountain-shattering realm, relying solely on this one martial art to clear your meridians. Li Dui, you are truly a monster. As he finished speaking, as if suddenly recalling something, he reached out and grabbed hold of me. He began to knead my arms and press against my leg bones, leaving not even my chest or back unexamined. A stream of true qi flowed from his fingertips, weaving through my bones and muscles. He examined me meticulously. His hands were pale and soft to the touch, yet the strength he exerted was controlled with absolute precision. It was only when he seemed to brush against something that he suddenly stopped, a crisp sound echoing in the silence. I lowered my head, suddenly overcome with embarrassment. Caught in the fiery vitality of youth, I truly could not be blamed for such a reaction. Yingyi's face immediately turned cold as he added, "I am merely examining your bone structure, do not let your thoughts wander." I nodded, though I did not believe him for a moment. Had his intentions truly been pure, he would not have withdrawn his hand with such haste. Regardless, he quickly returned to the matter at hand, stating that the way I have been cultivating has indeed led to complications. Fortunately, discovering this now is not yet too late. I stood there, stunned, wondering what sort of issue could possibly exist. My cultivation level was, after all, meticulously built up by the system step by step. With the foundation so obviously rock solid, how could there be any flaws? Seeing the blank expression on my face, Yingyi began to explain. True prodigies from the great clans cultivate multiple forms of external tempering techniques simultaneously while refining their bodies. Furthermore, they supplement this training with various medicinal baths. The bones and muscles tempered in such a manner are far superior to those of ordinary martial artists by more than just a single degree. But what of you? Even though your mountain-pushing thunderhand has reached its pinnacle, it remains in essence a solitary form of external training. Moreover, you lack the support of medicinal baths. In the end, you are still a significant distance behind. It was at this moment that I finally understood the truth. The path the system provided for me was indeed the most reliable standard solution. However, those prodigies from the great clans possess solutions that far exceed the standard. Just as with the meridian opening pill I consumed earlier, I could clearly feel my meridians expanding further than they had before. The more I pondered this, the heavier my heart became. It seemed that even when both parties achieve a breakthrough, the disparity between them could be so vast. Yet Yingyi's next words pulled me from the depths of despair. With your innate talent, you must not allow any flaws to remain during this body tempering phase. From now on, I will help you prepare medicinal formulas to slowly fortify your entire being. I nearly called him mother on the spot, but in the end I managed to restrain myself. Seeing that the night was deep and tomorrow was the first memorial service for my father, I prepared to rest. Naturally, I intended to leave the main bedroom for him. I would simply sleep in the room next door. However, Yingyi rejected the idea immediately. Go and carry the bed from the side room in here. From this day forward, you are not to sleep apart from me again. If someone were truly to come and assassinate you in the middle of the night, I fear that being separated by a wall would prevent me from rescuing you in time. As he spoke these words, his expression remained grave and solemn. Yet, as I looked upon his stature, my heart could not help but quicken its pace. Not until the bed was brought into the room did I realize that I had been overthinking the situation. The notion of a man and a woman sharing a room alone was in truth entirely non-existent. The moment he reached the bed, he began to meditate. His figure gradually faded, until finally only an ethereal presence remained in the room. I gazed at that empty space, suddenly reminded of Lin Peijiao's master, and casually asked Yingyi a question. In Dali, is there any woman who is exceptionally tall, possesses an incredibly striking figure, and wields profound martial arts? Beneath the moonlight, his silhouette reappeared, but he did not turn around, he merely cast a sidelong glance at me. The implication clearly being, who exactly are you praising? I hurriedly added, she was at least a head taller than me. Lin Yushui had indicated to me that the woman must have been nearly 2 meters tall. Upon hearing this, Yingyi was visibly stunned. Is she really that tall? He contemplated for a moment before shaking his head, saying, no, at least I have never encountered such a person. I then recounted the entire story of Lin Peijiao following that iron-masked woman to him. He fell into deep contemplation after listening. No wonder the princess's residence has remained in the dark for so long. The Lin family truly knows how to keep their secrets. He suddenly asked me, so what are your thoughts on your own fiancée fleeing? I answered without a moment's hesitation, she was right to run. Why should she remain in the capital to be nauseated by those rustic commoners every single day? It would be strange indeed if she had not fled. Yingyi let out a cold snort and remarked, your possessiveness is quite strong, isn't it? Early the next morning I donned mourning clothes to attend to the funeral arrangements. By the time the coffin was sealed, the rites were performed, and the burial was complete. It was already pitch dark. I held my father's spirit tablet, placed it alongside my mother's, and after offering incense, I quietly departed from the ancestral hall. For some reason, I found myself recalling the tales of cultivation and immortality from my past life. Thus, I asked Jingyi. His answer was absolute. There was none. Even the great cultivators at the Yangji realm rarely live beyond 300 years. I was stunned, secretly thinking that living for 300 years was already an incredible feat. This meant that cultivating to the very end would at least extend one's lifespan significantly. But Yingyi immediately doused me with cold water, warning me not to be obsessed with such matters. The so-called pursuit of immortality is exactly what has driven those madmen to such hysteria. Furthermore, it is not that Yangji cultivators can only live for 300 years. It is that they cannot survive the heavenly tribulation. He then proceeded to briefly explain the secrets of the Yangji realm to me. At the perfection of Dongzhu, one's lifespan is 3 cycles of 60 years. If one can withstand a heavenly tribulation, one gains another cycle. However, each subsequent tribulation becomes increasingly dangerous and brutal. The vast majority of people cannot even survive the first one. Those who manage to overcome 3 are already peerless experts within the world. Although I had not yet abandoned my intentions, I asked no further questions. Because he was right, these matters were still far too distant for me. Rather than indulging in pipe dreams, it would be better to continue increasing my attribute points. Coincidentally, at that moment, the system upgraded the 5-step plum blossom footwork to the minor accomplishment level. I decided to strike while the iron was hot and practiced for another round. 2 days later, upon my return from the outskirts, a burly man suddenly appeared on the path. He galloped toward me on horseback. His target was clearly me. The voice of Yingmei reached my ears just at that moment. He is at the early stage of Tongmai. Use him to hone your skills. My spirits were instantly lifted. I was just worrying about having no one to test my blade on. I drew the blade from my waist, first using the 5-step plum blossom footwork to dodge the spear he thrust toward me, and then the system immediately provided its augmentation. The entry-level Lu Hei sword technique, which I had just comprehended, appeared clearly in my mind, and I put it to use on the spot. Fierce chi poured into the blade, and the Han Shaoyang Sanjiao meridian was opened in an instant. Using this momentum, I steadily parried the long spear and leapt backward. We had only just exchanged blows, and while the man prepared to charge again, a flash of sword light arrived ahead of him. Scoundrels of the Blood Rain Tower, prepare to die. A flash of light slashed through, severing his throat. The assassin did not even have time to utter a second word before he perished on the spot. Only then did I turn to look at the person who had struck, revealing a man and a woman who appeared to be senior brother and junior sister. In truth, I had realized they were approaching long ago, but with Ying Mei's support, I felt no cause for concern. Since the other party had conveniently helped me slay the assassin, I cupped my hands in gratitude to the young hero. The young man who had struck, his face full of righteousness, replied, "Every one of us has the right to destroy these evil, demonic heretics." Hearing these words, I could only feel a sense of amusement in my heart. This young hero truly seemed as if he had stepped right out of a painting. Since he had the heart to offer his assistance, I took the opportunity to extend an invitation. If you two have just arrived in the capital and have yet to find a place to stay, why not reside at my manor for a few days? The senior brother and junior sister exchanged a glance. The young woman nodded slightly, and the youth readily accepted. "Then we shall trouble you." Thus I led this pair of martial siblings back to the Li Manor. After entering the estate, I learned their identities. The senior brother was Zuo Fenghan, at the Qi realm, and the junior sister Du Qianqian was at the Meridian Opening realm. Both were disciples of the Kunlun sect. Zuo Fenghan had come to the capital on this journey to seek the opportunity to reach a breakthrough in the Spirit Bridge realm. After arranging for them to stay in the guest wing, I returned to my study and began to sift through the ledgers once more. I stared at the various businesses listed there, contemplating for a long time, before finally slamming my hand on the table to make a decisive choice. Aside from the Wenhai Pavilion, the cosmetic shop run by Lady Shu, and the Jue Pavilion, all other assets were to be sold off entirely. The gambling dens were no longer needed, and the usury business would also be abolished. While these trades generated wealth quickly, the risks involved were far too great. Currently, there are far too many parties targeting the Li clan. Once someone sets a trap, I fear that instead of being killed, I would first be dragged into a legal entanglement. That would be utterly foolish. These 3 remaining shops are the true foundations upon which a great cause can be built. I intend to use the Wenhai Pavilion as an agency for newsletters and rankings of martial experts. Once a week, I will publish a ranking, and all the happenings within the Jianghu will be printed therein. With Princess Yuzhen providing the guarantee, this is entirely feasible. Meanwhile, Lady Shu shall focus on the feminine market. Once items such as perfume, lingerie, fine silks, and high-heeled shoes are produced, the noble ladies of the capital will undoubtedly go into a frenzy. As for the Jue Pavilion, it is even simpler. With so much knowledge within my mind, could I truly let it go to waste? Add to that the distilled clear liquor. If managed correctly, it will be more than enough to make this restaurant famous throughout the land. Having resolved my direction for the path ahead, I instructed Uncle Shu to continue selling off the remaining properties, while I traveled alone in haste toward the Wenhai Pavilion. Along the way, I also took the opportunity to survey the situation. The assassins from the Blood Rain Pavilion that day were largely recruited by Third Uncle. Given his temper, having suffered such a significant loss, he will absolutely not be satisfied. Yet that is the extent of his capability. If the Crown Prince or the Chancellor had truly acted themselves, it would have been impossible to send only a single cultivator of the Meridian Opening realm. Initially, that old man, Third Uncle, likely exhausted his life's savings to provide the deposit for those assassins. From this moment on, a genuine intent to kill has taken root in my heart toward him. However, now is not the time for rash actions, because once these relatives are defeated, the true masterminds behind them will finally reveal themselves. That shallow-minded Crown Prince surely still desires to see me dead. To him, I have simply transitioned from an ant that could be crushed at will to a cat or a dog that is merely a bit more troublesome. However, Ying Mei once mentioned that the intelligence network of the Crown Prince is remarkably poor. He does not even seem to know how that superficial fool discovered the connection between heaven above clouds and the Chancellor's estate. In other words, the Crown Prince is likely still in the dark. I am now aligned with the princess's estate, and regarding the Chancellor's side, their intelligence is far superior. There may be many of his spies within the princess's estate, so Gongsun Wen probably already knows. I have already handed that ledger to Long Bailing, and I understand perfectly why she cannot act against him yet. If that is the case, the person he truly intends to deal with right now is not me, but Long Biling. As for me, I am merely a stone blocking his path. If he can kill me, that is ideal, but if he cannot, he will likely seek to negotiate with me. With these thoughts in mind, I headed straight to the Wenhai Pavilion, where the proprietor nodded incessantly after hearing my proposal for the weekly gazette, yet he truthfully admitted one thing. He can handle the printing and distribution, but he is completely clueless regarding those Jianghu rankings. I waved my hand, telling him not to worry, for the princess's estate will dispatch me to take charge of that section tomorrow. He only needs to follow the template. I then finalized the layout draft with him. Only when the first test print came off the press could I finally set my mind at ease. The first issue shall proceed exactly according to this plan. With the work halfway completed, I did not stop to rest, instead heading straight for the princess's estate. This time I held the jade token in my hand, I walked straight inside, coincidentally passing by the elderly scholar Zuo on the way, who was still sitting in the courtyard working on his compositions. I did not bother to pay him any mind and headed directly to the sutra chamber where I had previously met Long Biling. Unexpectedly, I had barely entered the courtyard when I collided with a small young lady. This girl was around 15 or 16 years old, with an incredibly delicate and refined face, her large round eyes sparkling like stars. She was momentarily stunned upon seeing me, asking, "Are you the Li Wei that my elder sister often mentions?" I glanced at her, my only thought being that she appeared quite lively, though perhaps a bit flat-chested. Before I could respond, Long Biling's voice drifted from the room, instructing Xiao Xiao to come inside. The girl playfully made a face at me, then spun around and darted into the room. When I reunited with Long Biling, she was still wearing the white silk veil covering her face. I cupped my hands in a formal salute and greeted her. She did not even bother to look up, remaining engrossed in her book as she asked what business brought me to her again. I saw no need to beat around the bush, so I laid out my concept for the Great Li Chronicles. I explained it to her in minute detail from beginning to end, from the layout and ranking charts to the various news reports from the Jianghu, and even the methods for wide-scale distribution. I laid every single detail out clearly for her. She listened in silence until I had finished, at which point she slowly set her book down and remarked that the idea was not bad. For this business venture, I shall have Lan Yu serve as your primary point of contact. However, there is one condition in this 100 flowers ranking you speak of. I must be placed at the very top. Upon hearing this, I nearly laughed aloud. This woman was truly confident to an extreme degree. Yet, if I were to be honest, she possessed every qualification to be so. At the very least, among all those I have encountered across both lifetimes, she was the most exceptional. Provided, of course, that the lower half of her face beneath that veil did not suddenly disappoint me. I followed her lead and continued our conversation. I have rarely left my home since childhood. I have never truly witnessed the beauties spoken of in legends, not even Lin Peiyao. The last time I saw her was 8 years ago, back when she was still just a young girl, so at least for this moment, Your Highness is the most beautiful woman I have ever encountered. Long Biling raised her eyes to look at me, her voice carrying a trace of amusement. Judging by your tone, it seems you are not yet fully convinced, but that is of no consequence. Wait until you have seen more of the world in the future, and you will understand. Even if you were to look upon every beauty in this world, you would still find that I am the most beautiful of them all. She spoke these words with an utterly indifferent expression, yet I could state with absolute certainty that Princess Noctrin viewed me with something truly unique. I had intentionally played along with her words earlier to probe her, hoping to see if she truly cared about the matter. The result was that she did not flare up in anger, but instead continued to converse with me. There is clearly something amiss here. Women are by their very nature strange creatures. In my previous life, I had long since studied them thoroughly. The more beautiful they are, the more they tend to dwell on such matters, yet she did not show the slightest hint of displeasure. This proves that, at the very least, I hold a special place in her heart, but no matter how hard I rack my brain, I cannot fathom what exactly makes me so special. Could it be that she has truly seen through my secrets, that I possess the memories of a past life and a system at my side? But that is fundamentally impossible. Thus, I decided not to dwell on it any further. Regardless, I cannot leave the princess's estate for the time being. If she has developed a favorable impression of me, that is, after all, not a bad thing. As for what she might be plotting regarding me, I have yet to discern it. She is a noble princess, she surely lacks no fawning over her. Could it be that she truly covets my body? However, I soon grasped the heart of the matter. Her insistence on being ranked at the top of the 100 flowers list is not merely for some hollow reputation. Because the prize she truly seeks to claim has never been merely the title of a common princess. She wishes to ascend to the highest position. She hungers for that seat of supreme power. I had only briefly explained the operational methods of the Daila Gazette to her, sharing just a glimpse of its potential, yet she immediately recognized how much influence this 100 flowers list could bring to her cause. That title of the world's greatest beauty, if managed and manipulated correctly, would allow her to accumulate a gargantuan amount of prestige. And on the path to seizing the throne, such prestige is sometimes far more effective than the sharpest blade. I of course understood these principles, but there was one thing I did not know at the time. In the heart of Longbitch Lin, she had already made her judgment of me. She was convinced that I was the one fated for her by destiny itself. For the true reason she investigated me had nothing to do with Lin Peijiao. Half of the words she spoke to me that day were nothing but falsehoods. She had targeted every individual who bore the name Li Dui simply because her mother, noble consort Wang, had once sought a divination at the ancestral grounds of the royal family, a prophecy of the 28 constellations, decreed to never deceive the mortal realm, predicting the union of Lin and Li, a destiny that would eclipse the sun, moon, and stars. Ever since that moment, she had secretly scoured the capital, filtering out every person named Li Dui. It was a pity that there were far too many who shared that name, each vastly different, and she dared not stir chaos in the world, fearing she might unravel the threads of karma. Regardless, the royal divinations were, in her eyes, incredibly potent. The fact that her mother could enter the palace and receive the highest favor in the harem was entirely due to this very guidance. It is only regrettable that noble consort Wang lacked the fortune to bear a prince. Otherwise, the world today might have been a very different place. Ever since Long Biling obtained that prophecy, she had long ago regarded this mysterious Li Dui, who had yet to reveal himself, as the future man of her life. That was the true reason she had refused all marriage proposals. After establishing her own estate, she firmly shut out all suitors, choosing to wait instead. At first, she never imagined that I would be that person, as I was already bound by a marriage contract, and my fiancée was the most renowned beauty in the capital. From every perspective, it seemed unlikely that I would ever have any connection to her. Yet fate is a cruel and peculiar thing. I had of my own volition stepped right in front of her. On that day, when she caught sight of the treatise in Lan Yu's hand and heard my name, she nearly lost her composure. Otherwise, given her temperament, no matter how exceptional my literary talent might have been, I would never have stood a chance of meeting her. At the time, I was completely oblivious to these hidden thoughts, and she would never have dared to speak them aloud, for she feared that a man like me, if I did not believe in destiny, might intentionally act against the will of heaven. In that event, her prophecy might truly have gone astray. But ironically, my subsequent actions time and time again only served to confirm that her judgment was correct. Whether it was my treatise or the display of great strength, everything aligned perfectly with her desires. In the depths of her heart, I had become increasingly like the man she had waited for so long, to the point where even she felt a flicker of uncertainty. How in the end, when I arrived at Mingyu Pavilion to meet Lan Yu, Shi Yingyi appeared. The moment he revealed himself, Long Xiaoxiao immediately lunged straight toward him. Yingyi, I have missed you so dearly. Yingyi reached out to catch her, steadying her with a practiced hand and an expression of helpless affection. You are grown now, yet you still act like a mere child. Having said this, he finally raised his head to look toward Her Highness, Long Biling. There is a matter that I must report to you, Your Highness. Master Li's martial talent is, I fear, on the level of a monstrous genius. He then recounted the events of the past few days, describing how I trained and how I achieved entry into the path of cultivation. Every detail of how I left him in utter astonishment was laid out for her to hear. He had anticipated that Long Biling would be somewhat alarmed, yet that was not the case at all. Her brows did not even twitch. In her heart, she had long since concluded that I was the one mentioned in the prophecy. It was as if she believed that for one who is chosen, being a monstrous talent was a perfectly natural occurrence. Thus she merely replied with indifference, then continued to protect him. Do not let such talent be wasted or cut short halfway. Yingyi, having already developed an admiration for my ability, naturally had no objections. Once Lan Yu and I had finalized every detail, the core content for the inaugural issue of the Dali Weekly Gazette was essentially complete. Beyond the official news and reports from the pugilistic world provided by the princess's estate, I also included the 100 Flowers ranking and the Qianlong ranking. Moreover, the scope of these rankings would not stop at Dali. It was intended to draw the Great Way into the fray as well. The prize Long Biling sought to claim was never merely a single region or one nation. She intended to propel our reputation forward and strike directly at the heart of the Great Way with our influence. To put it plainly, this was a form of cultural encroachment, a calculated grab for the power of discourse. Only after these matters were settled did I finally depart to return to my estate. Back at the Li residence, 2 guests from Kunlun were still staying as residents. That evening I instructed Fu Li to prepare a banquet. Since my father had only recently been laid to rest, the meal could not be overly extravagant or wasteful. It consisted only of simple, modest dishes. Zhuo Fenghan and Du Qianqian showed no signs of dissatisfaction whatsoever. It was clear that they truly possessed the decorum of disciples from a major sect. I sat with them to keep them company and casually inquired about their intentions. Are you two currently descending the mountain to temper yourselves? Du Qianqian immediately chimed in. Indeed, that is correct. My senior brother descended the mountain not merely to seek a breakthrough, but to provide aid to those in need and uphold justice. Upon hearing this, I nearly failed to suppress a laugh. To hear her speak of upholding justice, it certainly sounded quite convincing coming from her lips. Following that, she began to recount the various events they had encountered along their journey. From braving the elements to slaying demons and purging evil, to navigating treacherous conspiracies and venturing through hellish realms. In short, she spoke with such unbridled enthusiasm. It was evident that she deeply cherished every experience from this journey. Furthermore, whenever she mentioned Shi Fenghan, her tone softened perceptibly. Each time she uttered the words senior brother, it sounded sweeter than the last. It was a pity, then, that this senior brother of hers remained utterly oblivious to her affections. From beginning to end, he merely focused on his meal and wine, occasionally offering nothing more than a distracted, indifferent grunt. It was exactly as it seemed. Watching them, I couldn't help but sigh on her behalf. This was no mere bond of fellowship. This was clearly an unrequited devotion crashing against a wall of ice. The meal concluded, and the two of them retreated to their respective rooms. Yet my thoughts remained occupied with Ying Yi. Having integrated the Luhe saber technique earlier that day, I saw no reason why I couldn't continue to surprise him this evening. Thus, upon returning to my room, I immediately advanced the 5-plum blossom style from small success to great success. After a period of practice, my Yin Xiao meridian was opened, further complementing the Luhe saber technique I had mastered earlier. With the Han Shaoyang Sanjiao meridian also opened, I had reached the realm of 7 meridians and 4 vessels. However, just as I intended to bathe and rest for a moment, Ying Yi suddenly appeared. The tools required for the acupuncture I mentioned have been prepared. We shall begin tonight. I glanced at the medicinal herbs and silver needles placed beside him, and I surmised that he had likely spent the time I was at the princess's estate gathering these supplies. After all, over these past few days, he had rarely dared to leave my side unless it was strictly necessary. An individual with a cultivation at the perfection of the Qi-Si realm, like Zhuo Fenghan, if he were to truly close the distance and strike to kill, would still pose a significant threat to me at my current level. I stood to the side, watching him prepare the medicine, and suddenly asked, "Could you tell me your name?" His movements did not falter in the slightest. The 3 words Xiao Shuying were uttered with crisp, absolute clarity. I silently repeated the name to myself, finding it even more captivating than the moniker Ying Yi. I casually remarked that with beauty as striking as Yin Di's, surely there must have been many who pursued you in the past? He stood with his back toward me, his silhouette cast against the dim light, the lines of his waist and hips particularly captivating. I spoke half in jest, yet my words were primarily intended to probe his inner thoughts. To be honest, no matter how well Long Biling treated me, I always felt it was merely the condescending favor of a superior toward a subordinate. Xiao Shuying, however, was different. The sensation he evoked in me was not one of mere appreciation, but rather an indescribable intimacy. It felt akin to that of a senior, yet it was not strictly limited to the role of a senior. It even felt somewhat natural, as if he and I were predestined to be drawn close to one another. It was precisely for this reason that I grew certain of my sincere desire to possess him. As for the marriage contract with Lin Pei Jiao, I had not concerned myself with it in the slightest from the beginning, but Xiao Shuing was not the same. He was the one I truly wished to hold in my grasp at this very moment. It was just a pity that he did not seem to understand it yet. Or rather, he fundamentally refused to admit that his benevolence had long since become intertwined with other deeper emotions. After hearing my words, he merely replied with indifference that there were indeed many butterflies and bees swarming around him. However, there were few people left who could still see him, for the majority of those who had encountered him were already dead. This response left me thoroughly satisfied. Having said that, he instructed me to prepare the golden jade bronze. My mood was excellent, so I quickly shed my robes, and wearing only my undergarments, stepped directly into the water. As the medicinal liquid made contact with my skin, he turned his head to glance at me. His gaze faltered momentarily, but he quickly looked back, as if he were attempting to convince himself of something. Regardless, it mattered little if he viewed me merely as a junior. He even offered a casual compliment on my progress, noting that my physique was quite firm, which brought a surge of delight to my heart. I never expected that this aloof and transcendent figure would possess such a keen eye for talent deep within his bones. Once the medicinal potency in the bath had fully permeated my body, he told me to stand up. The very next moment, silver needles struck my body like a torrential downpour, moving with a speed that was truly terrifying. I followed his instructions exactly. Since the acupuncture needles had avoided my lower back, sitting down was not particularly difficult. However, it was not long before the medicinal efficacy began to seep through the needle points, surging into my body and awakening with a vengeance. What began as a mere sensation of warmth quickly escalated into a scorching, white-hot blaze. I felt as though every inch of my body from head to toe was being set aflame. The agony in every fiber of my being was beyond description. "You must endure this," he urged. Su Xiaoxing stood beside me, watching me intently, sweat beaded on his forehead, betraying his deep concern. I gritted my teeth and endured for half an incense stick's time until the potency of the medicine within the water subsided, at which point he began to withdraw the silver needles from my body one by one. In that final moment, as my entire body tensed, the flow of energy in my chest suddenly snapped and I succumbed to darkness, losing consciousness instantly. When I awoke the following day, the first thing I did was inspect my own body. The scent of medicine had completely dissipated and my skin felt impeccably clean. Even my undergarments had been replaced with fresh ones. Having strictly forbidden any handmaidens from entering my chamber last night, who else could have tended to me? Aside from Xiao Shuing, there could be no one else. A warmth suddenly welled up within my heart, and I could not help but let my thoughts wander. Yet I quickly suppressed these stray reflections. Once I had finished bathing, I made my way to the front hall. I learned that the 2 senior disciples had departed at dawn, which did not surprise me in the slightest. Everyone has their own affairs to attend to. Even Ying Yi, usually so attentive, is no exception. He cannot be by my side every waking moment. For instance, he has a particular preference for bathing in the morning. However, he never ventures too far, always keeping me within his sight to ensure my protection. Knowing he was currently occupied with his bath, I seized the opportunity to attend to a matter he was not yet meant to discover. I descended alone into the storehouse, the place where we kept our reserves. The funds acquired yesterday from Uncle's sale of the shops and gambling dens, exchanged into a vast quantity of silver, had been handled carefully. I kept only a few thousand taels for the household expenses and future capital, while the rest had been moved here. Suddenly, the system notification appeared. 220,000 taels of silver detected. Would you like to deposit? Without a moment's hesitation, I nodded in agreement to initiate the deposit. Immediately, my accumulated points surged upwards. Gazing at the long string of digits, a genuine sense of security finally settled in my heart. While relying on others is acceptable for the time being, I cannot simply sit idle and enjoy the fruits of their labor forever. With my resolve solidified, I exited the storehouse. Since there were no other pressing matters today, I decided it was time to pay a visit to Dao Baiju. After all, perfume requires strong spirits for distillation. This was a task that had to be undertaken sooner or later. I drafted a blueprint and instructed my servant to procure steamers, ceramic vessels, and commission a craftsman to forge the necessary apparatus. As for the brewing of rice wine, this world has no shortage of established methods. I decisively sought out a master vintner. While I took it upon myself to oversee the entire process, I was so preoccupied with the distillation process until the afternoon that I was blindsided by the grim news. My second uncle was dead. I was left utterly stunned upon hearing this. Although I harbored deep resentment toward the old man, we were still kin. I could not simply feign ignorance. Thus I hastened immediately to the Laifu Inn. Upon arrival, I saw my second uncle's corpse laid out at the entrance, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers whispering in a flurry of activity. Apart from Li Ji, who was absent, all other members of my second uncle's household had gathered. The second aunt's face was etched with fury as she argued with the constable, and my sister-in-law wore an expression of intense hatred. The concubine cowered in a corner, trembling with fear, while Li Lai stood with a bewildered expression, failing to grasp the situation, occasionally revealing a look of profound agony. As I stepped closer, I heard my second aunt grit her teeth and declare that this wretched woman had conspired with a paramour, and after being caught in the act by my uncle, the two of them had struck him down. She claimed her eldest son was currently in pursuit of the villain. I knew instantly that these words were entirely fabricated. What paramour could possibly exist here? If such a person truly existed, it could only be Li Ji. The moment I appeared, the expressions of the entire family shifted into something deeply unsettling. They had intended to plunder my gold bullion, but before they could seize the wealth, their own house had fallen into chaos. I strolled unhurriedly toward the concubine, and looking down at her, I asked, "Are you certain that you and this paramour killed my second uncle?" As soon as my question hung in the air, the second aunt's demeanor grew visibly tense, the hatred on my sister-in-law's face deepened, and only the concubine remained in that half-dead, unresponsive state. "My lord, I have failed my duties as a wife. The tall paramour is the one who killed the master," she replied. The constable standing nearby began to interrogate her, demanding to know the identity of this paramour and his distinguishing features. He was immediately shooed away like a pest, with the claim that the culprit was, in essence, a man of small stature and slight build. With sparse stubble on his chin and thinning hair, he described it so vividly as if such a person truly existed in this world. However, the moment I heard it, I understood the root of the matter. These tired lies had undoubtedly been coached by the second aunt and Li Ji beforehand. Yet there remained one thing I could not fully grasp. He was on the verge of being cast aside as a scapegoat to bear the burden of the crime. Why at this very moment was he still so blindly obedient? Could it truly be because of something as hollow as love? I watched his trembling, fearful appearance, and in my heart I found the entire situation to be utterly preposterous. Once he had accepted remaining here today, the matter of him acting as a scapegoat for Chu Long was effectively a foregone conclusion. Even Ying Yi could not help but transmit his voice to curse under his breath, stating that this woman was truly not worth such a sacrifice. He had originally intended to stand on the sidelines and simply observe the spectacle, never expecting the events to escalate to the point of a son murdering his own father, and subsequently forcing a concubine to shoulder the blame for the deed. But at this moment I had no mind to lament, for I had already seen through their schemes. If this testimony were allowed to proceed, Li Ji would, in all likelihood, successfully evade justice. Yet that is something that must never come to pass. I refused to stand by and watch this woman lose her life because of a piece of absolute trash. While that wretched beast remained free from the reach of the law, I scanned the scene once more with a critical eye. The second aunt and the concubine were clearly exerting every effort to protect Li Ji, but Li Li and Tong Sao were not necessarily willing to cooperate. Furthermore, even Li Ji did not place any trust in those two. Otherwise, he would not have fled in such a desperate panic. I immediately asked Ying Yi in my mind, "Do you have a way to force them to reveal the truth?" Ying Yi's voice was soft, yet it carried a chill as he replied, "Naturally, and even if you had not asked, I would have intervened regardless. I have no desire to witness such a festering conclusion either." No sooner had he finished speaking than he unleashed an invisible surge of power, manifesting the heavenly demon mind-confusing art from the void. It was a tier-8 mental technique that he had exerted great effort to execute. To him, this was merely scratching the surface of its true potential, but when used against mere mortals like Li Li and Tong Sao, it was an I immediately seized the momentum to press Tong Sao. Could Tong Day truly be such a person? At that very moment, it was as if an invisible force pried Li Li's jaws open, and he let out a piercing, desperate shriek. That is not the truth. It was our eldest brother. It was our eldest brother who struck down and killed father. Tang Sao completely collapsed, unable to contain her emotions any longer. She wailed that it was that beast, Li Ji, along with that wretched woman, Ling Luan. After their father-in-law discovered their affair, they heartlessly beat him to death. They then coerced us into lying to cover up their heinous crime. The onlookers gathered around immediately erupted into a chaotic murmur. The news was so shocking that it sent shivers down everyone's spines. The second aunt seemed to have her strength drained away, collapsing onto the ground. Yet, unexpectedly, her first words were not to scold her son but to wail in bitter resentment. Why must you all seek to destroy my Jir? If he is taken away now, this entire Li household will be finished. She then began to weep and curse at that damned old man. Was that old fool unable to do anything useful, that he had to insist on taking that young concubine into the house? It is truly for the best that he is dead. My poor, pitiable Jir, you must run far away. Under no circumstances should you ever return to this place again. I stood there rendered speechless by her words. This woman had truly become pathologically obsessed with Li Ji. She had clearly been praying for the second uncle's death for a long time. My second uncle had truly turned his own life into a laughingstock for the world. His wife spent her days longing for his imminent demise. His concubine was clandestinely committing adultery with his own flesh and blood, and in the end he had truly perished at the hands of the son he had sired. Seeing the crowd's indignation as they prepared to rush at the second aunt, I ordered them to clear the area immediately. If this chaos were to continue, I feared none of them would be able to bear the consequences. I turned my gaze toward Li Lai. First, take the second uncle to my residence so we may handle the funeral arrangements. Regardless of all else, the dead must be treated with the utmost respect. I cannot allow the second uncle's funeral to be conducted with such negligence. With eyes bloodshot and swollen, Li Lai said nothing, silently pulling the ox cart carrying the body away. The bailiffs proceeded to escort the concubine back to the magistrate's office. The sister-in-law followed behind to serve as a witness. In the blink of an eye, the second aunt was left alone at the scene. She suddenly raised her head, glaring at me with raw hatred, and shrieked, "It was you! You are the one who plotted to frame me." I furrowed my brows slightly, having no desire to waste words on such a deranged woman. In the final analysis, while it was indeed the love-sickness agony poison that exposed everything, one must look at the root of the matter. It was because Li Ji and that concubine had already harbored an illicit affair long before. If there had not been a clandestine relationship between them, the poison would never have taken effect so rapidly. As for Li Ji murdering his own father, that had nothing to do with me. My only intention in having Doan Ni force the truth out was to ensure the true scum was brought into the light. From start to finish, I have acted with complete integrity, but how could someone like my second aunt ever understand such principles? She only knew to despise me for asking that question, and to hate me for tearing away the veil covering her shameful secrets. I did not deign to cast another glance at her and turned away to depart. On the path back to the Li estate, I could not refrain from asking Don Lai a single question. Did you not say that the lovesickness agony only takes effect when two people truly love each other? She gave a faint acknowledgement and replied, "That is correct." I pondered for a moment, my heart filled with growing disdain. This meant that Li Ji truly harbored genuine feelings for that woman. Yet in the end, he still cast her aside to shoulder the blame for him, while he attempted to flee alone. Doan Ni's tone turned somewhat cold. "Men are inherently fickle and heartless," she remarked. Upon hearing this, I hurriedly sought to defend myself. I would absolutely never act in such a manner. She did not answer, merely responding with a soft, cold huff. When I returned to the estate, Li Li was still nowhere to be seen. Whether that child had managed to bring the corpse to my residence or not, I felt no urge to investigate. None of them had ever treated me with true sincerity, so by allowing him to enter the estate to handle matters, I had already fulfilled my duty and exhausted my benevolence. If he chose not to arrive, then so be it. As for that pair of senior and junior siblings, the Guluns, they had already returned. They were practicing in the courtyard. I cast a glance their way and, with complete resolve, proceeded to break through right before their eyes. In any case, they had no knowledge of my previous cultivation level, so I had no fear of my secret being exposed. I first elevated my pulse opening technique to the entry level, then cultivated the everlasting finger, and finally continued to refine my Xiaoyao sword art. 3 consecutive waves of memories poured directly into my mind, as if someone were dismantling these 3 cultivation techniques and demonstrating them to me, piece by piece. I proceeded to practice them immediately. As the pulse-seizing manual began to circulate, the bladder meridian of foot Taiyang was instantly unblocked. Once the evergreen finger was initiated, the heart meridian of hand Shaoyan was cleared, followed by the unfettered sword technique, which successfully opened both the governing vessel and the belt vessel. At this moment, both the 12 standard meridians and the 8 extraordinary vessels within my body had been completely unblocked. Life force flowed through all 6 meridians, while the medicinal power of the Maitong meridian pill continued to dissolve slowly within me, ceaselessly tempering and expanding my meridians. The 2 siblings of the Kunlun sect naturally could not perceive the secrets hidden within me. In their eyes, I was merely someone struggling with each technique, having only just touched the threshold of cultivation, truly a confused novice. But only I understood clearly that I had already mastered 6 techniques at the second stage, 5th level. These were not merely changes in martial maneuvers. Each technique carried its own unique innate effects. The mountain-toppling Thunderhand could enhance the durability and strength of the arms. When reaching the first stage perfection, it could grant a martial artist an additional 5 parts of physical strength. Now that I had refined it to the second stage perfection, its effect upon the meridians became even more formidable. Even when I was not actively channeling energy, it maintained its effect, much like permanently carrying a talisman of increased strength. The 5 sets of plum blossom footwork allowed me to hone my evasion into a natural instinct. The pulse-seizing manual was even more ruthless. Its gripping force could penetrate armor and weapons alike, inflicting direct, profound damage upon an opponent's meridians. The evergreen finger inherently possessed dual properties. If used with heavy intent, it could throw an enemy's internal energy into chaos, yet if used with a gentle touch, it functioned as a healing art. As for the Luhe blade and the unfettered sword, they were the most direct methods for augmenting lethal damage. If second-stage techniques were already this domineering, then higher-tier methods were truly no different from immortal arts. For instance, the phantom-like techniques I encountered earlier were clearly forms of spiritual or psychological manipulation. If that could not be called sorcery, then what could? I stood in the middle of the courtyard, absorbing the essence of these martial arts. Suddenly, I wonder how much the young master truly understands about the Prime Minister's estate. I had heard enough to grasp the full extent of the situation. What was destined to come would inevitably arrive, yet I did not allow the slightest hint of vulnerability to show upon my face. I merely replied with composure that regarding the Prime Minister, I knew only that his name was Gongsun Wen. Upon hearing this, Du Qianqian let out a cold, mocking laugh, asking how much longer I intended to keep up this charade. Zhuo Fenghan maintained a solemn expression and began to recount what they had encountered earlier that day. He said that a young man had begged them to rescue his elder sister. The young lady had been abducted and taken to heaven above the clouds, so they had snuck inside and managed to locate her. The girl informed them that the true mastermind behind heaven above the clouds was none other than the Prime Minister's estate, and she advised them against involving themselves further. She then added that if they truly wished to save her, they should seek out the Li family, because the Li family were the rightful owners of heaven above the clouds and were the largest shareholders in name. If only the Li family gave their consent, she would be permitted to leave. After finishing his account, Zhuo Fenghan looked at me and asked with grave seriousness, "Brother Li, is this truly the case?" My expression remained entirely placid, without a single ripple of emotion. The Li family are indeed major shareholders of heaven above the clouds, but it is only a nominal stake, not one of real power. We possess absolutely no say in the affairs of that place, especially since it is an establishment left behind by my late father. He passed away only a short time ago, and at present I do not possess a deep understanding of the inner workings, let alone who the true puppet master behind the scenes might be. Zhuo Fenghan furrowed his brow slightly and asked, "Does that mean you have no way to secure the release of that woman?" Du Qianqian immediately interrupted, her tone dripping with disdain, as she struggled to contain her impatience, saying, "Senior brother, I am certain he is in league with that old Prime Minister. Have we not seen enough of these injustices along our journey?" Zhuo Fenghan maintained that same look of misplaced compassion and self-righteousness. "Brother Li, regardless of how your father conducted himself in life, it is now certain that the Prime Minister's estate is far from clean. It is entirely possible that your father's death is also connected to the Prime Minister. Why don't we join forces to expose the true face of Gongsun Wen and restore justice and peace to this capital?" Hearing this, I found the situation utterly ridiculous. Did this young hero truly fancy himself a savior? But before I could respond, a streak of sword light suddenly flashed from the right. A figure lunged forward with blinding speed, clearly aiming straight for my vital points. Just as Zhuo Fenghan prepared to intervene, the figure suddenly froze midair as if shackled by an unseen force. An instant later, his entire body was crushed by an invisible pressure, causing him to explode into a mist of blood. Bones shattered and tendons ruptured, and with a sickening thud, he collapsed to the ground, dead beyond all doubt. Zhuo Fenghan stood stunned. It was truly laughable. The drama he had meticulously staged was not supposed to unfold this way, yet the truth was clear to me. This man was, 9 times out of 10, not a death-sworn soldier of the general's manor, but merely a puppet brought here to play a part. Still, that strike from Ying Yi had been remarkably swift and decisive. Zhuo Fenghan steadied his nerves and cupped his hands toward the surrounding void, asking the senior to reveal themselves. Naturally, no one deigned to answer him. I took the opportunity to feign a look of lingering terror, suggesting that perhaps a passing senior moved by injustice had simply lent a helping hand. Jin City is a place where hidden tigers and crouching dragons reside, I remarked before stepping forward to examine the corpse. Zhuo Fenghan squatted down as well, pointing to the markings on the arm of the deceased with a solemn expression. "These are the death-sworn soldiers of the general's manor. To investigate the general's manor, my junior sister and I once sought out righteous warriors in Jin province. They claim that anyone bearing the mark of the Tao Ti on their arm belongs to Gongsun Wenong." I cast a glance, a cold sneer rising within me, for Ying Yi had already transmitted his voice to inform me. This Tao Ti tattoo was merely a superficial drawing, devoid of the distinct blood essence characteristic of the general's manor. In other words, this man was nothing more than a puppet sent to deceive me. If I were still the Li Wei of the past, a Li Wei who had only just attained a flicker of martial cultivation, upon seeing this spectacle and connecting it to my father's death, all while being ruthlessly hunted, I would have almost certainly believed that the Prime Minister had marked me for death. At that point, the ledger and the contract in my possession would have become the very blade they could use against me. It is a pity that they have chosen the wrong opponent. Zuo Fenghan, true to form, continued his probing brother Li, although a senior intervened to save us this time. But it is enough to see that the Prime Minister's manner is determined to kill you to silence you. Is it possible that our Li family is in possession of some evidence? Whether it concerns the crimes of Gong Sun-wen or not, I barely had to think before directly cutting him off. Even if there were any, most of it was lost along with my father during that bloody ambush. Du Qianqun, standing by his side, stared at me with an expression of pure disgust. I believe he simply cannot bear to give up the lucrative assets of Tianshang Yunjian. After all, that place is perfectly suited to the tastes of pampered young masters like you. Now that he has become a shareholder there, how could he possibly be willing to let it go? Their words treated me as someone who would sell their conscience for the sake of the Prime Minister's manor, a scoundrel who cares only for personal gain. Zuo Fenghan added his own remark, even without evidence of his crimes, just the fact that you, the nominal proprietor of Tianshang Yunjian, are willing to step forward as a witness would be enough to bring Gong Sun-lun down. Internally, I immediately completed the second half of his thought. By then my family fortune would have vanished into thin air. All the alleged misdeeds of my father would be pinned upon me, and I would be left to suffer the catastrophic consequences. A rather convenient scenario, wouldn't you say? Therefore, I saw no reason to be polite with them any further. That is out of the question. I do not believe that the old Prime Minister will keep hounding me forever. Furthermore, the shares in Tianshang Yunjian were invested by my father years ago. It is the enterprise he valued most dearly. I cannot allow it to wither away in my hands. Upon hearing this, Du Qianqun immediately flew into a rage. You are truly blinded by greed, acting as an accomplice to evil, valuing wealth more than your own life. I did not even bother to look at her again. I turned toward the entrance and called for the servant to escort our guests out. He panicked upon hearing this, and even attempted to seize me on the spot, but my senior brother quickly restrained him. However, Zuofeng seems to possess some measure of sense. At the very least, he still maintains the facade of a righteous young hero. He hurriedly pulled Du Qianqian back and called out, "Junior sister, Brother Li has committed no crime. How can—" Having said that, he proceeded to drag me away, half pulling and half dragging me along. I stood rooted to the spot, watching the pair of senior martial brother and junior sister depart, with only one thought in mind. People like them are the most troublesome of all. The scales of justice in their hearts have never been balanced. They are simply accustomed to wrapping every action they desire to commit in a thin veil of righteousness. In time, even they themselves come to believe it as truth. Zuofan is exactly that type of man. That he did not strike me down today is not because he truly understands the principles of morality, but because he has yet to determine whether the senior who intervened earlier is still present. He remains uncertain as to what connection, if any, exists between myself and that senior. Ultimately, he simply lacks the confidence to act and thus refrained from doing so. As for the daily news, it has finally been officially released over the past few days. Early this morning, as soon as I arrived at Wenhailu, Proprietor Chen placed the printed sample before me. I took it and carefully scanned through it. The paper was still somewhat coarse, and it fell far short of the quality I had hoped for. I had previously instructed him to seek out craftsmen to improve the process, but this is truly not a matter that can be rushed. For now, it is all that can be accepted in such a short time. On the front page of the paper, the left side features imperial decrees and news regarding court officials, while the right side contains news from the Jianghu. I cast my eyes over each line, and very quickly a piece of information caught my attention. The diplomatic mission of Da Wei will arrive in the capital in a few days, likely to propose a marriage alliance. A thought flickered in my mind. Among the current imperial house, the princess most suitable for such a union truly seems to be none other than Long Xiaoxiao. Though, of course, the possibility that they intend to seek the hand of a princess of the lower rank cannot be excluded. I did not dwell on it further. I continued to flip down to read the news regarding the Donglin Temple. The abbot did not fail his tribulation. The fate of the 5 immortal sect in Zhenggu remains unknown, yet they are openly advertising that anyone may hire the agents of Da Wei, while the Fengtong sect is once again holding a selection for the Holy Sun. The result, however, remains that not a single person has managed to pass. I couldn't help but smile as I read. Is this newspaper already accepting advertisements in its very first issue? That princess of yours truly does not waste a single inch of space. But as I turned to the back page, my entire being immediately surged with excitement. On the left side was the Qianlong ranking, and on the right, the 100 Flowers ranking. The Qianlong ranking consists entirely of individuals under the age of 30, the most exceptional young talents of this generation. The top position is unexpectedly held by the Taoist disciple of the Great Wei Dao sect, Jiziyu, who has reached the god burial realm at merely 27 years of age. Witnessing such formidable strength, I could not help but draw a sharp breath of cold air. As I continued to scroll down, I caught sight of a familiar name. Shifeng Han, ranked 56th on the Qianlong ranking and hailing from the Gulan Xuan Shui sect, is the first disciple of Xie Haijing and is also a master of the flying sword technique. It certainly sounds imposing and majestic. Meanwhile, the Hundred Flowers ranking on the other side appears far more spirited. Long Biling remains firmly ensconced at the top position, and inscribed behind her name are a few lines of my own poetry. Clouds are her robes, flowers are her face, the spring breeze brushes the dew as the blossoms flourish. If not seen at the Jade Mountain peaks, we would meet beneath the moon at the Jade Terrace. My name was even signed at the bottom of the verse. Upon seeing this, the corners of my mouth twitched uncontrollably. Could it be that this princess is acting with such blatant audacity? However, after a moment of reflection, I noticed that the commentaries from others further down were also signed. It seems she did not single me out with malicious intent, yet as someone who has only just gained fame at the Mingyu Pavilion, if this name is printed for all to see, will it truly add to the allure of the ranking? But then again, since it is her intention, I see no reason to trouble myself with correcting it. Looking further down the Hundred Flowers ranking, the second position is held by Hua Yodi, the third belongs to Shang Xuan, the eighth is Lin Peijiao, the ninth is Lu Feiyan, and the 10th is none other than Long Xiaoxiao. The more I read, the more I could not help but find it amusing. This princess certainly does not bother to hide her biases when compiling the rankings. She even shoved young Long Xiaoxiao directly into the top 10. She even included a commentary written with such grave seriousness. Precocious, clever, and impossibly adorable. The one who signed it was Princess Yuzhen. Though if one speaks of Long Xiaoxiao, her features are indeed exquisitely beautiful. Aside from the fact that she is somewhat flat in certain areas, this ranking is not entirely unreasonable. And so the night passed by in silence. By the second day, the capital welcomed a group of guests that commanded even greater attention. The delegation from Great Wei has officially arrived while I remain here at the Old Road. Both the clear spirit and rice wine have been refined, and the stage is now set for the drama to unfold. I spent the entire morning stationed by the distillery, decanting the spirit into porcelain vessels one by one. In the end, I managed to produce 5 jars of wine. I took a small sip. It was roughly 38% alcohol by volume. Though it cannot compare to the aged spirits of my past life, in this world, such potency is already remarkably strong. Furthermore, if the spirit were too harsh, it might not find a ready market. A concentration such as this is in fact perfectly balanced. After lunch, just as I intended to resume my cultivation, Xiao Dai hurried over to deliver a message. Her Highness the Princess wishes to see me. The delegation from Great Wei had only just arrived. Having reached the capital this morning and summoning me by afternoon, it is highly probable that the matter concerns the marriage alliance between our two nations. Given the current circumstances, the one most likely to be offered is Long Xiaoxiao. I grabbed a jar of wine and flew toward the princess's residence. Upon reaching that familiar sanctuary, I found only Long Biling in the room. Long Xiaoxiao was nowhere to be seen. The moment I stepped inside, she immediately began to question me. In the imperial court, the officials are all urging the emperor to send Xiaoxiao to Great Wei for the marriage alliance. What am I to do now? Her voice carried a sense of utter exhaustion. It was evident that this burden had been weighing heavily upon her mind for quite some time. I did not rush to provide an immediate answer. Instead, I first needed to clarify 2 critical points: what the emperor is thinking and what the princess herself intends to do. She looked at me and let out a weary, sorrowful sigh. Neither my father nor I wish to see Xiaoxiao sent so far away, but the emperor's resolve is no longer firm. If this continues until the morning court session tomorrow, I fear he may truly give his consent. The envoys from Great Wei have already implied that if Great Li refuses, it will be seen as an insult to the dignity of Great Wei. War between our two nations will inevitably follow. After hearing this, I did not show my hand, but instead mentally reviewed the political landscape of Great Wei. Through the intelligence I had gathered previously, I had long since realized a vital truth. Within the Wei court, the civil officials and military generals have never seen eye to eye. At its core, this entire affair is merely a pawn in their internal power struggle. If Great Li does not handle this with care, the warmongering military... However, if we were to shift our approach, the entire situation would change drastically. I pondered for a moment before speaking slowly to the Highness. We could suggest that Prince Tianyang approach the Emperor, explaining that she is not inherently opposed to the marriage alliance, but rather she fears that because the state of Wei prioritizes martial strength above all else, she might encounter countless grievances once she is wedded there. If the state of Wei truly acts in good faith, they should first organize a literary competition. So long as the emissaries of Wei can utilize their literary talents to suppress those whom she dispatches, it would serve as proof that Great Wei possesses a profound foundation in culture, which would then be considered a genuine show of sincerity. The moment I finished speaking, Long Biling's eyes lit up. This strategy allowed her to immediately grasp the crux of the situation. The conflict in this chess game does not lie solely between Great Li and Great Wei, but also within the internal rivalry between the civil officials and the generals of Wei. By shifting the reason Long Xiaoxiao gives for refusing the marriage alliance, changing it from a mere reluctance to marry afar to a critique of the state of Wei as crude and unrefined. Lacking any literary grace, the civil officials in the Wei court would undoubtedly be unable to sit still, because this would no longer be a matter of whether to form an alliance but a matter of national dignity for the entire state of Wei. At that point, those pedantic old scholars would surely step forward themselves to exert pressure on the warmongering faction of generals. Furthermore, the Wei Emperor Cao Zhenru has never been fond of slaughter and warfare, thus this conflict would naturally be averted. Yet Long Biling quickly suppressed her joy. She looked at me again and remarked that while this measure is excellent, the participants in the literary competition must be absolutely certain of victory. As her gaze rested upon me, I understood her meaning instantly. In truth, I had long since made my preparations. My life as it stands was saved by the princess's estate. If she had not dispatched a shadow guard to protect me, my remains would likely be rotting in some desolate, remote wasteland by now. Although I harbor a vague suspicion that even if I did not step forward to help this time, Long Biling might not have abandoned me regardless, I still needed to display my capability to repay this debt of gratitude. Moreover, I still desire for her to grant her blessing to the union between myself and Xiao Shuying. She is the cousin of her mother. I did not summon her here lightly. Furthermore, the Shadow Guard is barely over 30 and has already reached the late stage of the Dharma image realm, and in the future, at the very least, she is destined to ascend to the void-piercing realm, with even the potential to touch the realm of eternal connection. A woman of such caliber is someone I absolutely do not wish to let go. But if I wish for Princess Yuzhen to concede such a trusted confidant to me without having achieved any merit, then I am truly dreaming in broad daylight. Therefore, I immediately cupped my hands in a respectful salute. Though this humble one is untalented, I am willing to shoulder this burden for your